Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlot Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by Mr. Andrew Rosecone. We're here for another very exciting episode of My Star Wars Show because, Andrew, we have a new Star Wars show to talk about. The first two episodes of Leslie Headland's The Acolyte are available. We've both watched them. I watched them basically as soon as I dropped on Disney Plus. I've been super excited. We did a video talking about The Acolyte before it came out, when we kind of got the first trailer and first round of interviews, and a lot has transpired since then. And there's a lot of polarizing opinions on the show already. I would say both good and bad faith polarization.
Yeah.
But we'll get into all of it. I just want to start, Andrew. 40,000 feet in one single sentence. What do you think of The Acolyte so far?
One sentence. Okay. Shoot. In that case, the one sentence is vibrant. I think vibrant. Well, that's a one word. I'm sorry. That's one word.
That works.
Sure. Lots of great world building. We'll go with that sentence. Great world building.
Yeah. For me, my thoughts on The Acolyte are the show is intriguing so far. There's a lot that I really love about it, but I think the script is not very good. That's kind of my opening thought on The Acolyte.
It's a little stiff. A little stiff, I think.
Yeah. And we're going to get into it in full spoilers. So if you've not seen The Acolyte yet, click away. But I think you're either are here because you watch The Acolyte, or you're here because you just sort of hate brigading any videos of The Acolyte. So in that case, leave a comment. It'll boost us in the algorithm, I guess.
I think we did a video on something, and I'm pretty sure like a good some of the comments were negative, and you can tell they were just purposely looking for keywords on YouTube to just post like hate on something. I forgot which video it was.
It was The Acolyte.
Oh, was it? Okay. Well, there you go.
Andrew, I think where I want to start this discussion is in the era itself. Yeah. Because I had a conversation with Tanner, who watched the first episodes with me.
Awesome.
And who really had no context for the High Republic at all. And so he was remarking to me that to him, it didn't really feel that much different than like the prequel era. And as I was explaining to him, I think that this has always been the problem with the High Republic. Because the High Republic as an era is very cool, but it largely sort of trades on the same like clean aesthetics that the prequels do. Like we go to Coruscant and we go to the Jedi Temple, and I think it's episode 1, but it might be episode 2. And it really doesn't look that much different than how it looks in Revenge of the Sith.
Right.
What do you, because you mentioned the world building. You talked about the world building being strong. And I tend to agree in a lot of respects, have issues in other respects, but looking at it from this perspective, the perspective of the era of the High Republic, do you think this show is doing a good job introducing this new concept and time period to people?
When I said world building, I didn't really mean in terms of like where we are timeline wise. I was thinking more of like, aside from Coruscant, there is no like reused planets or systems. That's kind of what I was thinking more like. I mean, we see aliens that we've never seen before. I forget, is it Jecki? I think that's her name, Jecki. Like, I have no idea what she is. Yeah. Other creatures that kind of just look strange, even by Star Wars standards, just because we haven't seen them before. But yeah, I mean, you know what's funny is I see so many comments, not just about this, but just Star Wars in general, where people are like, oh, this is like this many years before or after. Like, why does everything still look the same? Yeah. And I think I've kind of been insulated against that because as a kid, when I was younger, I played Knights of the Republic, KOTOR, right? And KOTOR takes place 3,000 years, give or take, before the films. And the technology isn't all that different. So I'm just kind of used to it, I guess. It was just something that I haven't really thought too much about. But you're right. I think that this show, but also a lot of the key art for like the High Republic, like comics and books, has a very clean, very pristine, sanitized look. And I think that's kind of what they're going for, because it's supposed to reflect the peaceful, the kind of Pax Romana that the Republic is experiencing, where everything is prosperous. There's no Empire. There's no Clone Wars. There's no like great, terrible Sith threat. It's just like it's just peacefulness, and nothing really kind of happens, and that's why you have the gold shimmering robes for the Jedi and the very ornate lightsabers, and everything just looks very clean. Like it's
Yeah.
the opposite of the old future of like the original trilogy, right? Which reflects more of the dire circumstances of oppression under the Empire and stuff. So I get what Tanner's saying, and I have a lot of respect for Tanner because I know he knows so much more about films than I ever will. So like I understand where he's coming from. But like looking at it from the Star Wars angle and not so much like the cinephile angle, I think it makes sense that
Yeah.
for it to be that way, like to have that, like I think of the greatest offender of that. I always think of Padme's ship, the one from Naboo, all chrome and just
Yeah.
glistening in the sun and everything, right? Like very, very like what you think of like future, right? Like no marks, no like blemishments or anything. But I believe it's a tool that they use to kind of reflect what's going on in the greater galaxy at that time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because I think you can really feel that sense of prosperity when we're on Coruscant. I somebody shooting off fireworks, so hopefully it doesn't get too disruptive of the video. But what can I do? We're talking about the Acolyte. See if that helps.
See that?
What I was saying to Tanner is like, the to your point about KOTOR, I think that KOTOR, it has all the same touchstones as the Star Wars around it, but it also feels very distinct because KOTOR came out at a time when the prequels weren't really solidified yet. I mean, Attack of the Clones had come out, but KOTOR was obviously in development since before Attack of the Clones. And so I don't really think that like the identity of the prequels was totally at the forefront of BioWare's mind when they're making the game. They're kind of pulling from the more like dirty and lived in original trilogy, but then they're introducing a lot of their new aliens, or you get HK-47, and you're getting all these planets and Jedi that look different and locations never seen. And I think that that's not really what the High Republic is. As you're saying, the High Republic is this pristine, really ornate understanding of the Jedi Order and of this time in history. So I think that it makes sense that as a result, it kind of does feel like the prequels. And I think a lot of the prequels sort of glossiness that this show has on purpose, the prequels have because that's just what the CGI could do at the time. Like everything looks smooth and it looks the way it does because those movies are a product of their time.
The freaking Naboo battlefield looks like the Windows wallpaper in the background.
It does. So I think that, you got to contextualize what the High Republic is. I do think that it is a sort of a general issue with the High Republic that you probably could set it. You could set it in the prequel time, and I think people would generally not be too freaked out.
Yeah.
They'd say, oh, okay, this must just take place a little bit before Phantom Menace or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it doesn't really clock as an issue for me because, to your point, I think the number of really interesting aliens and robots and everything we get here more than compensates for any sort of shortcomings that the High Republic as like an overall aesthetic might have. My biggest takeaway from these episodes is that we're back to an era of really weird guys. There's so many great weird guys in these first two episodes.
We got Pip, who's a cute little multifunction like Swiss Army knife droid looking thing. I like the randomness of like kind of getting into it, but like the introduction of like that sedation parasite. Like we it's just there. I mean, it's not really important, but it's kind of there just to add like a little seasoning, kind of like add a little spice to like what's going on. The gonk droid, it's not really a gonk droid in the background, like what I mean, like the little just a little scattering. That really cool character design at the very very beginning, the one that what's her name pays off. He has kind of like a it reminds me of kind of like that elephant looking dude from A New Hope. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes,
like the one she like tosses a coin to or whatever, and he like puts in his little bag. Like I love that kind of like gas mask design. It just looks very like novel and like there's just we're gonna get into it more, but like there's just a lot of like the cynic in me is like there's a toy, There's another toy. But the non-cynical part, the optimistic part is like, oh cool, like just more designs, just more, flavor, more texture.
Yeah, and there's like the guy who definitely not become a toy because he's too fucking creepy. Like the robot attendant on the prison ship that has like a fleshy head. Do you
Oh
remember
yeah,
what
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking about? He's got like this much of a head. How
Yeah,
do
he
I
does like
mirror
that
this?
weird
He got like
EMP
the
thing or
front. Yeah.
whatever. On the droids that are also chairs.
Yeah, yeah. There's just a lot of really clever little creatures in this show, and I love that. Or when because we're briefly with Jedi Master Soul, we're training some younglings, and we see these little funny furry guys that are sitting in there, and I just really love that. I think it adds a
I,
lot of personality. Oh, and
I,
one other I want to shout out from the prison ship. There's the guy who's like out of his mouth comes this big arm,
like out of
or out of
his
his
like
head. That's what
forehead.
it
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
Yeah. I just think that's, and I was remarking to Tanner, who's seen less of the Star Wars Disney Plus shows, like, to me, that's a big part of what these shows are missing. Even I adore Andor, but it's just human characters. I think that the
Hmm.
aliens are so important to the texture of Star Wars. So to see so many of them, in the Acolyte already is great.
Oh, what a whiplash that is, right? Going from like Andor to like this, where like it's like just humans, and then like bam, like no one, like almost nobody. I mean, there is obviously Soul and May and Osha, but like every other Jedi is something that's not like a regular human. Like it's
Yeah.
cool.
There's one other high level point I'm curious to ask you about, Andrew, which is the overall look of the show. This has been actually quite contested. I've seen some reviews that say the show looks excellent, and I've seen others that say that it looks very cheap. Do
Hmm.
you fall on either side of this?
I've seen both of those points, and honestly, I do think there are moments where it does go back and forth between the two. Like, I think I heard somewhere like this is like one of the higher production value shows they've done for Star Wars. I don't know if it's
By
the highest
budget, yeah.
one. Yeah, and there's some scenes where I can feel like that looks kind of cheap, or like that looks I don't have like the cinematographer's like eye or like to see for like, but it's every now and then I would see like the lighting looks weird. There's like more than one light
Yeah.
source kind of thing, because that's something that like anybody can just pick up on, like where like the light in the background is being reflected this way, but the light in the foreground's like it's a little like off in certain scenes. But like when they're like like you said, when Master Soul is kind of walking around, the younglings are like explaining what they see while they're meditating. Like that looks like straight out of the movies to me. That looks
Yeah.
like fine. But then they're like when right at the beginning when Osha no, I'm sorry, May arrives at the planet, and that kind of looks off. The exterior kind of looks a little off. I don't know what it
Yeah.
is about the skyline or something. And then when she goes inside, it looks fine. When inside of the building, it looks fine, but outside, it just looks a little off-putting. But I think
Yeah.
because it's such a short, like quick scene, I don't know, they really decided like, is it worth putting like the effort for this little quick scene or whatever. So I think there's moments where it does look kind of made for TV, and there's other moments where I'm like, this looks straight out of the movies. So it's not
Yeah.
completely consistent, but yeah, I could see both points.
I think it looks pretty good. I mean, you raised 2 points I totally agree with. The first is the lighting. The show is not lit very well. I mean, this is seemingly a problem across all the Star Wars shows and even the movies. Like, I think that Solo looks like shit. I love
It's
Solo,
so dark.
but it's so fucking dark. Every time I watch the movie, I remark to whoever I'm watching with, I'm like, it's just lit wrong.
You know what's
So
good?
this is, yeah.
I have an anecdote about that. Last week, I was visiting one of my a family friend of ours owns a furniture store, and they have a bunch of TVs on display, and they're all hooked up to like Wi-Fi. They're smart TVs. So I actually started watching Solo, and I could not see any like the behind
Yeah.
the TV was the sunlight was coming in from a window, and it was illuminating like the area. And like I was trying to watch Solo, I'm like I can't tell I can't make heads or tails of what I'm looking at. So I changed it to Bad Batch. And then Bad Batch also had the same issue where it's just really dark, and I'm like, is it the TV? So I watched. So I switched it to like I think it was what's the one with the giant red panda, the Disney movie?
Oh, Turning Red.
Turning Red, and that one looks perfectly fine. Maybe it's
Yeah.
animated me, that's why. But like, I was like, yeah, like Solo and some of the other Star Wars projects have an issue with just it's really dark to see.
Yeah, and it's weird that these are like persistent issues because like ILM was at the forefront of tech.
Mhm.
And Star Wars films have always had a high level of technical fidelity or innovation or whatever, that I just don't think a lot of these shows have, and I think that's where they feel the cheapest. I think pretty much all the Star Wars shows are lit bad. The other point you raise is the inconsistency, and it's in the exterior locations. I think the problem is, and it's weird that I'm calling this a problem now, because I was very complimentary of this fact in our pre-release discussion, but I think the fact that they're not using the volume is to their detriment at times, because I think ultimately, if you're shooting on a real location and you're having May walk through a real location, and then through raw CGI, you're trying to put this settlement into that location. Now, I don't know how much of that was actually built. I don't know how much is in CGI. I'm not sure. But at least if you're in the volume and everything is digital, you can sort of make it all look very contiguous. Like nothing really stands out as being weird in Mandalorian or Ahsoka or whatever. You might look at those shows and be like, that all looks bad at a certain point, but at least it all looks the same degree of bad. And so I think when you're in these interiors and they have controlled sets, that's when the show looks the best. But I think on the whole, I do appreciate how natural a lot of the show does look. I've seen people say that it looks and feels like it's more for TV than the other shows do, and I just don't necessarily agree, because I think that it's physically constructed a lot better. There's a lot more sets. The shots are a lot better composed. Like Ahsoka didn't look good at all, I don't think, from a composition perspective. Even though I love that show, I think Dave Filoni's inexperience with live action came through a lot there. When I don't necessarily think it's the case here. I think the show on the whole, I would lean a lot more to very good. I'll be very curious when we're visiting the Wookiee Jedi next time. And we're going to, I would assume, have a lot more exterior, and we're going to be in the jungle, and we're going to have a lot more CGI at play, I imagine. I'll be interested to see how that looks. But
yeah, looking at how the second episode ends with that snippet on whatever the planet is that's not Kashyyyk but looks like Kashyyyk. Like the way once you get there and you see like the two guys or whatever, it doesn't look that great. Like it looks very kind of, I don't know, like a game show made on Nickelodeon or something for like in the 90s or something, where it just looks like, it's supposed to look natural and like forested or whatever, but it just looks very like clearly just artificial looking for like a foresty kind of area where everything's just, flat laid out, like structured. Oh, that was really cool. I like seeing those little pods, like when they get bristled and they shoot out like all that like pollen. I thought that was like a really cool touch. I love like little details like that. But like just like when you see like they're in an open area and it's like it just doesn't feel like this is what you would see like it's not real life obviously, but like an actual jungle setting that's not artificially created.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the other thing that does help the show look quite nice is that I think the costuming is really good. I think that the characters look great. May's whole outfit is fantastic, and I really love the look of the Jedi robes. I mean, that's definitely where the High Republic feels the most distinct, I would say. So I think the characters do a lot to sort of obviously draw your focus away from sort of picking out things in the background that look poorly CGI. But let's now get into the plot a little bit more, Andrew. And I want to keep sort of funneling us down from these high level questions and these more particular ones. I'm curious what you make of the mystery of the Acolyte, because this show was very clearly positioned as a murder mystery, a new genre for Star Wars to tackle. And then they give it away right away. And now obviously there's going to be more mysteries, but they don't even make an attempt, of course, to have Osha and May's identities be mysterious at all. I think it's evident from the moment when Osha is unable to use the Force to recall Pip to her hand when she's in the cell. It's very clear that the person who murdered, I forget her character's name, but Carrie Ann Moss, I think it's very evident that something's wrong. And then it's only minutes later when the script reveals to us in full and to the other characters that yes, May is alive, and she's the one killing these Jedi. Now we don't know exactly what happened that led to the fire that May sets, but I feel like the way information is being delivered to us has not been very satisfying. What do you think about that?
Really? I like that it wasn't prolonged. I was kind of worried.
Sure.
I'm like, are we gonna keep going like episode to episode where they're still not sure? Like, no, like we settled that by the second episode. And I was kind of glad they kind of got that out of the way. Because if that was like the whole or like even half of the show was trying to prove her innocence, I would just find that very frustrating as a someone as an audience member,
Sure.
just because like the whole thing where like when she shows up and Master Torben's already dead, I'm like, oh my god, like man, like I don't like when it's like coincidences, just like the plot
Yeah.
relies too much on coincidence. And so like when Yor shows up, she's like, no, like she didn't do it. Like I'm like, oh thank God, finally, we're not gonna keep doing the doubting thing back and forth, because I feel like that was gonna be frustrating for me. And when you said that she couldn't use like the force and stuff to recall Pip, like for a second or for like a little bit, I kind of thought maybe this is kind of like a split thing, like a split personality thing, or maybe
Sure.
I thought maybe she has one personality that's much more like, able, like force capable, and the other is like not. I was like, maybe she
Yeah.
has like, like, because I hear about how like twins sometimes, like when they lose and the other, they kind of occasionally they'll like kind of have like the split personality where like they fill in that gap, they take on the role of the other person to kind of keep them whole or whatever. And we kind of get into that too because we have a little mention like when the flashbacks and stuff between them, the kind of like the force dyad thing kind of we see with Kylo and Rey. It's very
Yeah.
similar, not exactly the same thing because I don't think they can transfer things, physical objects, but the kind of like when she says like one born as two or something like that, I'm like, oh okay, there's something going on here. But I'm glad I'm glad we kind of got that out of the way so we could just focus on the greater mystery of why is it important to hunt down these. I mean, we know all
Yeah.
four of them were stationed on that planet when that incident happened when they were children. That's why there's like a personal connection. But the mystery of, first of all, who is the master, and then the mystery of how, if Master Soul saw her die, then how is she like here? I mean, that could also be explained. I'm sure they can do. I mean, Fast and Furious does that all the time, explaining deaths away easily. But like,
Yeah.
what exactly is? Why is she hunting them down? Did she think they're responsible for the death of her family? I mean, I think that's what it's. I think that's like the more likely
Yeah.
answer. But I wasn't too. But I really didn't want them to keep like drawing out like her having to prove her innocence. Like no, like it's not me. It's my twin sister. Which is like okay, like yeah, of course that sounds like sure. But then we have like the evidence of like the mind probe. Master Soul does like the mind probe kind of thing. And then obviously the how could she have done this other attempt, which is clearly in your custody. So I'm kind of glad they got that out of the way so we could just focus
Yeah.
on the greater mystery of the connections of the Jedi Masters and also of who the Master, the Sith Lord is.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you in sort of the broad strokes because I agree that those are the two most compelling mysteries they have. I'm particularly interested in the Sith character. A lot of people think I forget his name, but May's supplier who makes her the poison. Some people think
I
that
saw
he's
that. Yeah, that's
gonna
actually a
be
compelling theory. I think Kiram, something like that.
yeah. I don't I like that's interesting. I like that we can already speculate about that, and I think that they've done a better job seeding the suspense and the intrigue there. Seeing the Sith ignite his lightsaber as episode 1 ends, I really like that. I think the reason that I take issue with how they handled the May and Osha thing is that I kind of think that the twins concept is dumb. I have a really hard time with it because like it just feels silly. I can't really escape that sort of surface level complaint of her having a twin and the twin being immediately revealed, and then the suspicions lasting only as long as it's seen until another character assuages those suspicions. The Jedi Council, who's certain that Osha is the criminal, immediately basically regress on that and like actually no, she's cleared. And of course that's because as you're saying in the script, they illustrate that there's a crime happening somewhere else, so of course it couldn't be Osha. But I think that even that in itself is a problem because it feels like there's really never much tension there. Like even the example you gave when Yord clears her name with the poison, we're left for like 3 seconds to worry that she's it's been a case of mistaken identity before Yord just comes down the stairs. But why did Osha even really break off in the first place? Why didn't Yord come intervene right away? I think that there's just these issues with how the plot is written, and I really
Okay.
have to wonder how, because obviously it's the same actress playing May and playing Osha. Are we really going to be limited in how these two interact by merit of there being one actor for two characters? Are we going to get in a situation where it's going to be all like shot reverse shot whenever they're communicating? Or are we going to get some kind of awkwardly CGI double in? I just think that, why even set this up as a mystery? What does Osha even really accomplish in the plot? Because Soul could just have, because the relationship that Soul has to Osha and to May, he could simply just have to May. And it could simply be Soul and Yord and Soul's Padawan hunting down May, and try to unravel the secret of Sith, and trying to figure out what May's motivation is for killing these Jedi. I just find the whole twins thing to be a little bit, it just doesn't quite sit with me right. I think that it's the least interesting plot thread they have.
I mean, yeah, I now that you mention it and you framed it that way, I guess it does. What you're saying is like it kind of just muddies the plot a little, having like an extra, not a loose thread exactly, but having a complication to the story where like it could have just, you say one character and just have the mysteries around that one character. But I also feel like Star Wars isn't like, it's, how to explain this, it's not new for Star Wars to have twins as a theme kind of thing.
Sure.
Like, I mean, we have Luke and Leia, and then like in the EU, like in the old EU, like Han and Leia have twin children, and like twins, and it kind of makes sense now. Having seen this now, I understand like the initial pitch of what she said, where it was like Frozen meets Kill Bill, because we do have like the whole thing with like Anya and I forget the other character's name in Frozen, but like the whole Elsa, yeah, she's the main one. And like, I get the pitch now, but I feel like that's gonna come more to the. I think that's gonna make more sense probably later on. Maybe right now, we're just 2 episodes in. We're a quarter of the way in. I feel like it is kind of like silly, like, oh, here's the good twin, here's a bad twin, but then like I feel like Star Wars kind of, that's a reoccurring theme. I think of like the brother and the sister, right? Like as like that those like the Morris gods, or like this is a reoccurring thing in Star Wars, to have twins. Like it's a thing. Twin sons, Abram, twin sons on Tatooine, you know what I mean? True. But and the Skull and Hadi thing with Ahsoka, right? Like kind of like it's an element of Star Wars, and I don't know how much of that is just like because I'm sure you've read like interviews or little things with what's her name again, the director,
Leslie Headland.
Like you can tell that she has an immense enthusiasm for Star Wars, and the things that she wants to put in Star Wars, and we're gonna get to that later on. Like the things she wants to include in Star Wars, like she has an idea, some kind of vision that maybe we're just not seeing, and maybe it's just not aligning with what we're seeing, but we're not quite there yet. So I understand how you think it's a little like frustrating or even maybe detrimental. But I feel like she might be cooking here. We just don't know yet. We don't know yet.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm more than willing to give her the benefit of the doubt, because I do think that what she's crafted here is very, very good on the whole. I mean, you're raising this point about her obvious Star Wars fandom, and she's talked about this in basically every interview. And I mean, I always sort of find a way to deride Dave Filoni whenever we do an episode. But I think that, when you watch Ahsoka or you watch Mando and you watch these things, one of my core issues with these shows, particularly as they progressed, was that Dave Filoni became more and more and more and more and more insular, and the references got deeper and deeper and deeper, and it was sort of like the Ouroboros snake eating its own tail, I think, at a certain point. And why I liked Andor so much is that Andor was super refreshing, because it was Star Wars, but there was all this new stuff coming in, and Andor is largely like ideological. But when you're looking at this show, obviously Leslie Headland cares about Star Wars as much as Dave Filoni does, and the show is full of references. I mean, there's people finding 50 Easter eggs in the first 2 episodes. But I think the
Mm.
reason it works so well is because you have all of this stuff that feels very archetypically Star Wars, like the score, for instance. We have John Williams at Home score, which I actually think is quite good. Like there's a lot of touchstones here, and it feels very Star Wars. But at the same time, I think she's doing a great job diversifying her take on the universe. The action is one dimension I'd really like to focus on in this regard,
Oh,
because
dude, so
it's
good.
so good. I mean, it's genuinely really, really good stuff. It's not just good for Star Wars, it is just really good choreography in general. I mean, if we take the first encounter between May and I believe her name is Master Undara, if I'm
Yeah.
remembering correctly.
Mhm.
And it's just exquisitely choreographed, and there's such great tension in here as there's this interplay between the characters as they're sparring on a dialogue level of, you know, Jedi will only bring out their lightsaber if they're prepared to kill, and all of these great lines that are here, and these dynamics of one character having the upper hand over the other, and that balance changing, and May's cunning ploy
Mm.
to throw a dagger at the shopkeep, leaving Andara open
Yeah.
for the second dagger to hit her heart. I just think that it's so great conceptually. It's got such great material. And then just a simple hand-to-hand wuxia-inspired combat is just excellent. What do you think of the action across these first two episodes?
I mean, it's awesome. I love like it's awesome just because like I feel I just here in the West a lot of like wushu stuff kind of just looks very it's very strange for our palate. Like for example, when Master when Carrie Ann Moss does a thing where she like, climbs the banister and then leaps onto
Yeah.
the top, like it's very kind of like, you know, like you said, like very wushu, very kind of like wire stuff, but like it makes sense within the world because like that's the force. You can it's the force
Yeah.
that allows you to do that. The, you know, jumping in the air, firing multiple kicks, like that's the force, right? It's just kind of enhances the visual storytelling of how they're doing these things. And I love it. Happens twice in episode 1, episode 2, where the camera slows down as she tries to reach for the lightsaber and she's never quite able to get either Soul or Adara's lightsaber. Like I love, and like the side steps, like when she does things, they just do the sides, the turn, like it's just so like you know, like drunk. What's the movie I'm thinking of? Like I think, you know, like Drunken Master kind of stuff. Like with Jackie, like just a lot of like very kind of like you can tell they're holding back, and it's also that holding back that ends up being their their undoing, sort of the not taking the threat seriously to the point where like, oh, like I like how it's not just a straight up lightsaber fight, because we see that so many times. And like, don't get me wrong, I Duel of the Fates, all that stuff, I'm down for a good lightsaber fight, don't get me wrong. And I know we're gonna get some really good ones later on.
Yeah.
But I love the kind of breaking down to the most, like we've talked this in the last episode we did, where we talked about the previews of it for Acolyte, like how like Jedi are monks essentially, especially we see that with Torben later on with the whole like, you know, the vows, like they're monks. I mean, they're knights kind of in the medieval sense of like, you know, architecture of, you know, how they serve like the government, but they're also spiritually on the side. They're basically space monks, right? And so like the whole mastery of the body and the moving and the blocking and like it's just so cool to see. And it's kind of the stuff I've been wanting to see for like ever since I first heard the inspirations of what the Acolyte would be like. I'm talking about the Kill Bill part. I was like, the Kill Bill, like okay, I'm thinking Uma Thurman. All right, swords or something, and it's like, oh no, the martial arts aspect. Like it's just so cool seeing you know, just the interactions of like, this is what like humans or mortals could do if they had the Force added to basic martial arts abilities, and it's just awesome to see unfold.
Yeah, I agree totally, and I want to circle back to the point about the restraint that you raise. And somebody made an interesting remark on Twitter about how this notion of only bringing your lightsaber out when you're going to kill, and it's sort of a last resort thing, and it takes a disciplined Jedi to not go to that. Someone was saying on Twitter, like, you know, you don't see Soul drawing his weapon very often, but you see Yord taking his out of his light
flashlight.
Yeah. And I think that this show is doing a great job through action, and I mean that both big action sequences, but then just simple actions people take, how they move around the world. I think revealing a lot of great stuff about character in the process. So let's talk a little bit about the character. Let's talk about Soul and Yord and his
Okay.
Padawan too. But the Padawan is really not hasn't done much yet. I think that Soul is my favorite character so far.
Okay. Yeah. I like Soul a lot. He's very Qui-Gon ish in his in the way he
Yeah,
deals with other people, and Qui-Gon's like one of my favorite characters of all Star Wars. So I definitely see that. And then of course I think I don't know if you saw. I'm sure you see it somewhere on Twitter, but I wasn't posted in the Discord of how he based his character very similarly to Qui-Gon Jinn.
yeah,
There's kind of like this underlying respectful defiance to him.
yeah. I think it's really effective because I we know from pre-release that this sort of challenging of Jedi dogma is a theme of the show and something we're gonna do a lot of, and I think it's intriguing how you see Soul, who is this wise character, this considered character, is even chafing against the Jedi Order wants and the protocols. Um, the way that he wants to act. He wants to go after May. He knows where May is going, but the Jedi Order is trying to call everybody back to have a meeting to
Mm-hmm.
decide what to do next. The ways that his clear attachment to Osha and to May color his interest in investigating this case in the first place. I think that he contains these great multitudes. This calm, reassuring, trusting, considered Jedi master, incredibly skilled in combat. Um, we have that side of Soul, but then we also have this side that's still, he doesn't have his full like emotional suppression that the Jedi are supposed to embody. He doesn't have that down yet, and so I find that is a really compelling set of character traits.
Yeah, and it's a great contrast, like compared to Yord, who Yord, like you see, is on the opposite end, where he's very much about appearances. He's very much, I mean, physically, but also like protocols, right? He's like
Yeah,
like he has like the handcuffs and everything. He's like, like, well, it's against like he's like, I think he tells him like you're gonna give a civilian a weapon, like you're violating like 30 different I don't know, laws or rules, whatever he said. But like Yord is very much by the book, and it's that's kind of, it makes sense when you're young, right? He mentions like, he's like, oh yeah, I reached knighthood like 2 years ago, so he's a fresh, fresh on the beat Jedi Knight. And
yeah,
it's that's natural for someone to have that personality to like try to prove themselves, like like you're like you're in step with the rest of what everybody else is like. And it's like it's that kind of sagacity and wisdom that comes with age that Soul has, where he knows now, like he's like, okay, like I know what works on paper, and then like I know what works in practicality, right? So like he kind of, we have that, I mean, they're not really in conflict so much, but they do have like two opposite ends of kind of what we've seen on the Jedi spectrum, right? Where Yord would very much be much more of a, maybe I don't know about Yoda, but like someone a little more, tightly wound kind of. And we
yeah.
kind of see that where he's just very by the book, and he takes great stride to like in his appearance, right? He's like he's like steaming or ironing his like robes or something, which is like something we've never seen before because it's just kind of silly. But they put that in there as a detail to show you that he cares very much about the every aspect of being a Jedi, right? And Soul's kind of like, he has like his hair is like kind of like a little rough around the edges. He's kind of he's a little worn out looking, sort of, with his like the way he carries himself. Like he's much more of like the experienced person who knows that like sometimes you have to bend the rules or work within the frame in a certain
Yeah.
way. It's not exactly by the book. And again, echoes of Qui-Gon, which I absolutely love. I love the whole kind of questioning, not like outright defiance, but kind of going with your instinct, trust, reading the room, basically reading
Yeah.
the room and knowing what is the way to de-escalate a situation, or kind of build that camaraderie. Like when they're on the ship and they're complaining that, well, just Yord really is complaining about her, having free run. He's like, hey, he's like, oh, and like he's like, trust me, like I know her, like she's not gonna do this or she's not this. Like I trained her and stuff, and like, and he's like, well, what if he's working with the other one? We could, like Yord's very just as someone who. Again, the life experience isn't there yet, right? So he kind of goes off what he believes, what he's been raised to kind of, file, step in line with everybody else kind of thing. So,
yeah. And I mean, another example I'd raise is when we're talking about Soul's Padawan, she's always asking permission to speak freely, and Soul's like, you don't need to ask me that. I think that we see in these younger Jedi this dogmatic belief in the council, in the
rigidness,
and I think in Soul we can already sort of see hints of like a disillusionment, and I'm really interested to see how that's going to play out as the show goes along, as the stakes continue to escalate, no doubt. And to that end, I mean, the last major players we have to talk about, of course, are, well, one but two in Osha and May. What do you think about them so far?
I was very disoriented at the beginning before I realized there was two characters. The whole like the death of Master Andara, and then like Osha just like waking up on the ship, and I'm like, wait, was that like a dream she had, or was that like a vision of something that was coming, that was going to happen? Like instantly you can tell like they're not the same character, because she's not serious. She's kind of like comes out, stretches out of bed. Like villains don't do that. Villains don't just look, lounge around and kind of stretch and get ready for the day's work. Like, you know what I mean? Like no one really does that. So like instantly they set the tone. They're like, okay, this is at the very most, or at the very least, not the same personality as a person who just did that thing that we saw. So once we kind of got a little bit more, and once she's talking with her crewmates, like, oh, you missed it. We were at Nar Shaddaa, and you missed the fun we had. I love the little random references, little things, the little building. And once she's like, kind of, oh, I'm gonna go out there and fix that thing or whatever, and then the ship approaches, like the fact that she didn't know instantly what was going on, I'm like, okay, this is clearly not the same character, or otherwise she would be more concerned and on guard, right? And we kind of see that too, with her bewilderment when Yord reaches for his lightsaber, which she makes like a quick movement, and she looks like kind of like almost like offended, sort of, but like on guard, like what's going on, right? Like she really, like, as an audience member at this point, you believe her, like, okay, this is not the same character after all. But yeah, doing the whole it is a little cliche. I can see what you're talking about. It is a little cliche to do twins, right? But then again, it's a Star Wars ism. So, but the idea, I'm very curious, because it seems like neither one was aware that the other one was alive, which I was like, oh, yeah. Like, okay. So that kind of makes me wonder, how is that going to change the dynamic now going forward? Like, is she still, is May going to somehow still seek revenge, or maybe it's for her parents? I don't know, but she clearly sees her sister's alive. But that whole, where neither one knew the other one was alive. And I mean, going back to the beginning with the whole, when Andara, she pulls off her mask and Andara's like, you like it kind of like going backwards. I'm like, oh, okay, that explains why she had that reaction. There's some history here between these characters of how they, they saved her from the loss of her family. And then we kind of go more into like how, again, another unusual exception for the Order to accept someone who's older. Usually younglings are brought in like at like toddler age, or even babies sometimes. And so we have Anakin, who comes in at 9 years old, and then we have Osho comes in at 8. So like this is like an unusual thing, and they kind of talk about that, about how it's very unusual, but for the circumstances, she had like no one else. They believe the other one was dead, kind of thing. They couldn't just abandon her, so they kind of, she had. I'm assuming she had some kind. They did a quick midichlorian check. All right, she's good. Bring her in. But as far as like as the characters between them, I keep thinking of the Frozen comparison that Headland makes about how it's Frozen meets Kill Bill, and it makes me wonder, how is this going to turn out like for them? Because I'm already predicting that there's going to be a lot of deaths. I think there's going to be a lot of deaths just because of the nature of the canon with the Sith haven't been seen in like, a thousand in a millennia, Kiadi Mundi says. So I'm
Yeah.
like, if they're gonna keep it, canon, like how are they gonna get around that? Or are they going to have to, like kill or mind wipe? I don't know what they're gonna have to do. But I'm trying to get back to your question about May and Osha. Yeah, I'm curious to see how much what's going to end up happening. Is there going to be a schism between the two where they each go their separate ways? Maybe they reconcile and they choose one path, light or dark. I don't know. I'm very curious, but it's it character wise, that is the compelling thing for me right now. But overall, I'm still just thinking of like my mind's just thinking of like how are they? Because this is 100 years before the films, and I'm like, how is in my back of my head? I'm just thinking the Sith Master. How is this tied in? So, but I hope that answered your question somehow.
I think that's great. I echo a lot of what you say, and to build on it a little bit, I like how they set up May as being very formidable. I mean, May kills Undara through, it's not a strict one-on-one fight that she overpowers Jedi Master in, but she demonstrates a sort of cunning that makes her very dangerous and
very, very Sith-like, Abram. Very Sith-like.
Yeah, and I mean, there's an argument to be made that she could have killed Sol if Yord hadn't stepped in and grabbed her hand and gotten that last hidden blade from her. If Yord hadn't been keeping his eye from above. So I think she feels very powerful, but she also feels kind of like panicked at the same time. And so there's like this wild animal quality to her that I think is really compelling. She is very dangerous, and you don't really know exactly what the nature of that danger is. But as she gets cornered, and she'll become even more dangerous. And she's already killed 2 of the 4 Jedi she has to kill. They set up the stakes for May, I think, very, very well. And they plant these interesting seeds, like needing to kill one of the Jedi without a weapon. I think that's really interesting.
I think that is why she starts off with every encounter is hand-to-hand combat, right? Like, it feels like it feels very gamified in a way where like it reminds me of like just in video games where you're like, okay, like I need to do this checklist. Let me keep trying. If I keep messing up, okay, go on to plan B, which is basically what she does. Is like, okay, she raises the stakes either with like when she's trying to punch Torben and she just can't. She can't get. I like how she kind of like as an audience member and you're watching her, you underestimate her initially just because of how it's so not cheesy, but it's so naive the way she's like, she does her pose like we have unfinished business. Like each encounter starts off, we have unfinished business, and it just sounds so like it like disarms you in a way, right? I feel like it kind of disarms you where and Undara didn't take her as a serious threat because it just like you don't want to go down this path, and like it's that subtlety of how she purposely presents herself to kind of outmaneuver and like what's the Rian Johnson quote, Abram? You know the one I'm talking about.
Subvert expectations.
Thank you. Subvert expectations, right? And with Torben, she punches and she's like, all right. And she jumps off the wall, does a kick. Okay, that doesn't work. And she just keeps trying these different things. And she just leaves like, okay, I can't figure this out. And then, she goes back to her base and like, oh, like here's a tip. Like very gamified to me. Like, oh, here's a tip. Well, everyone has a weakness. Everybody has a weakness, right? Everybody has a weakness. You just need to find his, right? And it's kind of like, Occam's razor, like maybe like the easiest solution is the most simplest and most effective one is just talk to him basically, right? She talks to him. She knows something about his past. It's like very mysterious. We don't know, but she says, I know why you took I forgot the name of the vow, the Brashar vow or whatever, which I guess was a reference to one of the comics, but and then like that gets his attention, right? That gets his attention, and she gets him to drink the poison, and like she's like finding like it's not just overpowering. She can't do that, right? She doesn't have like that full kind of training, right? She has some training, obviously, but she's not gonna whip out a lightsaber and just go for the easy Palpatine style like stab, right? She has to figure it out, right? And I'm curious to see going forward what are going to be the other 2 encounters are going to be like going forward. She's already halfway through, or 2 episodes in, she's already halfway through her mission, and it's like. So she's just a very fascinating character. Like you're saying, like she's she's clearly very well trained. She has like this knowledge, and like I like how they kind of tie it to her roots, right? She talks about how that poison comes from her home world, like that plant. And like in the EU, poisons and like potions and stuff are very closely tied to the Sith. Like Sith alchemy is like a thing in the expanded universe and kind of stuff. So like I like how they're drawing on it. It's very Palpatine like, right? Like
Yeah.
you win wars not just by might, but through like, through just working within the framework, right? The legal framework. And here she's doing things as like a Sith would, right? You don't just meet them out. I mean, she does meet them out in the open kind of, but like it's not like she waits when there's never more than one Jedi at a time, right? She takes on one at a time. She's very patient. She's calculating. Like she's a kind of villain I feel like we kind of haven't really had in Star Wars in like a very long time, or if ever.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think she's just set up really well, and that actually does segue us nicely, Andrew, into kind of the final thing I want to touch on here in our sort of first discussion of the Acolyte, which is this notion of pacing. You brought up the fact that we're already a quarter of the way through the show, that we're halfway through the Jedi that we have to kill. How there's these lingering intrigues about the Sith and about the justification for these Jedi murders, and it makes me wonder how we're going to use our screen time effectively now, because these episodes are not very long. Both episodes are about 35 minutes, excluding credits. The first episodes are just like a couple minutes longer, and the subsequent ones, I believe, read line are all remain in this 30 minute, mid 30 minute mark. So we really only have, what would that be, 3 more hours of show.
Doesn't sound like a lot, but yeah.
It's I don't know what we're gonna do, because one of my big knee-jerk complaints was like, oh, damn it, we got Carrie-Anne Moss for just one scene.
Yeah.
But there's pictures floating around of her in the show. It seems like we're gonna go back in the timeline to some extent. We'll spend more time with Master Undara, which is very exciting because I just love Carrie-Anne Moss, and so I'm really excited to see more of her character. But I wonder, and I hope that we're able to pace the next couple episodes right, because I think that is another thing that for me puts Andor above. Even when things might slow down a little bit, we're always moving the same plot forward. I think that my friend Ben right now is watching Mandalorian in season 3, and he's really liking the first couple episodes, and he texted me, he's like, man, I really love how it's all staying small scale right now. And I'm like, well, just wait. And because I think we sort of see these shows often spin out or pace themselves poorly, or introduce too many things, or we just kind of lose it. They fizzle, or they start having to run too fast. So I almost wonder if, well, we're halfway through Killing the Jedi because there'll be 2 episodes at the end, like 2 episodes for Killing the Jedi, a little bit more at the end, and then some flashback in the middle. There's a potential this is actually a very simple story, and we're just going to spend some time in the past, and then episode 5 and 6 fight the Jedi. 7 and 8 we have some kind of resolution. That's what I would like to see. Are you concerned about the pacing at all so far? Do you feel like it's going too fast, too slow? Do you think with the next 6 episodes we'll even everything out?
There was a tweet that what I'm about to say is not an original thought that originated from me, but one there I very much like agreed with, or I think it was Nick Calandra. I think he said they feel like the beginning of the show feels like you're kind of dropped in midway through the story, and like you're kind of like, it feels like it does feel like it's very front heavy, where they just throw all these characters into the mix with the Jedi Strike team and all the stuff going on with the May thing and the OSHA thing, and like obviously, and it's like, yeah, I do feel like it is kind of oddly paced, but like I'm glad you brought up Andor, because I remember Andor was a show that had a 3 episode premiere because it needed that, right? It needed that to kind of get us through that. What I consider the roughest part of the show is that beginning. I think we're kind of going through things, but then the rest of the show is like beautifully like section cording off into like 3-part, 4-episode part, like little arches, like little story arcs. They kind of work together. And so when I think of the, like, they did a 2-episode premiere, and I'm thinking like, Is it because they knew we would be left wanting after the first episode, or because they wanted? I feel like they just wanted to get the mystery of the twins thing out of the way.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they did that. So for the rest of the pacing, like I if I had to guess, yeah, we're gonna go see the Wookiee Kelnaka like in the next episode. But I'm guessing because I'm getting ahead of it, but we've seen so much in the previews, like there's a lot of scenes in like a foresty area, right? Where they all line up, whip out their lightsabers, and it's clearly a forest. When we see the red lightsaber twirling again through a forest, right? So I'm thinking like either Kelnaka is like he's gonna thwart this would-be assassination attempt. Maybe they get there in time to thwart it. Maybe it's a arc. Maybe it could be a 2-3 episode arc, and I hope not. Like, because I love the introduction of all these different planets. The planet that's Hoth but not Hoth. The planet that's Kashyyyk but not Kashyyyk. You know what I mean? Like all these different places are kind of showing us like rapidly. I think we see. Do you think? Is it Octo or what's it called at the end of episode 1 where May goes to see her master? It looks like Octo, kind of, no?
Oh, from Jedi Survivor?
No, I'm sorry, not Octo. What's the one where Rey finds Luke on the island planet? I forgot the name.
Yeah, I don't remember either, but I know what you're talking about now.
I can't really, but it looks like it, right? Kind of. It's like it's that planet, but maybe not that planet, right? With the where the black rocks are on the shoreline and everything, right? It looks very similar to like, you know, where Rey goes to like in the hole in the ground kind of thing. That
I know you're right. That is the name of the place. I'm thinking I forget because Batu is the place in Jedi Survivor.
Yes,
you were right.
I think Octo. Yeah.
So
I was like, okay, like we're seeing like a lot of these planets, and so I hope we see more variety in the biomes and stuff like that, because Star Wars is awesome when it does that. So pacing wise, I don't know what to expect really. I'm not familiar with Headland's work really. I don't know. I'm sure she's done stuff, but like I can't point to say like, oh, off past experiences this is what I'm gonna expect, because I can't. I don't have that knowledge. But I don't know. I feel like we've seen a pattern of Star Wars shows kind of fumble at the goal line, sort of the last episode or last 2 episodes. This is very with Book of Boba Fett, with Mandalorian. A lot of there's another live action show that I think I'm blanking on right now, but like we're good. It's like the horse, you know, that meme with the horse where it's divided into sections, right? Where it's like beautifully drawn, and then like last parts are just like a 4-year-old drew it or something, right? And so I don't know what to expect for the pacing. I like how they've been able to explain most things. I looked at it because this is the earliest thing we've seen timeline wise, right?
Yeah.
Live action timeline wise. And watching it, because I haven't watched it with my wife, because I don't think she really cares about the Acolyte really, because it's not one of the main movies. But watching it from the perspective of someone who probably wouldn't understand Star Wars, like we kind of we assume that you know what these things are, right? Like assume you know what the Force is, assume you know it takes a lot of that stuff kind of out of the way. Just requires you having prior knowledge, right? Even though it is the earliest in the timeline, right? And so I don't know how that's going to progress for the rest of the show. I don't know how. There's like no onboarding really. You kind of just go through it. You have past knowledge. But yeah, I really don't know how it's gonna progress. I don't think it's gonna do that. There's not enough time to do the Andor thing of doing little arcs. There's no time for that. So I think maybe 2 episodes on Kelnaka, maybe 2 episodes on Soul. This is me guessing early on. I don't think Soul's gonna survive the show. I just have that feeling. If he's like Qui-Gon, who also didn't survive his debut, but I feel like I think you're right. I think we're gonna do 2 Kelnaka, maybe 2 for Soul, and then wrap up things with the last 2.
I have a small correction to make also, because it was bothering me because I knew that Batu wasn't right. That's where Galaxy's Edge is.
I should have known that.
Kubo is the planet in Jedi Survivor.
Oh, okay. That sounds right. Yeah.
Because I couldn't remember that, but I remember Rambler's Reach, which is the settlement in Jedi Survivor, which I really like. And then I was like, "Fuck, I don't remember what planet that is."
They're all just hub planets.
Yeah, there's so many planet names. I need to do like flashcards for my Star Wars planet names.
Like I don't remember any of the names of the planets in these episodes, like we just seen, and I think most of them are just like 4-letter short names, and like I don't remember. I just know they're like. facsimiles of ones we've seen already. Thankfully, Abram, no tattooing so far. No tattooing so far.
True, and I really appreciate that.
I appreciate the restraint.
I did see somebody say that the ice planet, it's called like Kalva or something like that. Just this,
I think
starts
so.
with a C and it's got a V in there somewhere.
Yeah,
apparently that was in the Clone Wars for one episode.
Oh,
so
okay.
That's sort of the depth to which
deep cuts.
Yeah, that's the depth to which the references we have are working on. But no, I think you raised a lot of good points, and I guess sort of where I want to close, Andrew, is one final question that I want us to revisit our answer to when we get to the finale, which is the Acolyte living up to what you hoped it was going to be
so far?
Yeah,
I think so. I mean, we kind of grazed the subject. The dialogue isn't the best. This is no Andor. This is not okay. Andor. This is not. There's no great soliloquies or great speeches, and we're only 2 episodes in. I know I was reading about I forget his name, the character that plays Soul. Like he spent 4 months learning English prior to filming, and he's pretty like it's adequate. He does a good job, I think, of delivering the lines. It doesn't feel like he has he's carrying like note cards in his pocket or something. Like he's doing pretty well. I feel like a lot of the other characters, aside from Soul, May, and Osha, everybody else kind of just feels like they're just, I don't know, they're just going through the motions. I really like the I forget his name, but the character that associates with May, Kirim, something like that. This kind of like slimy, kind of squirmy kind of character he is when they encounter him, and he's kind of just she's like, you sold me out, and he's like kind of just like he's like, he kind of reminds me of Benicio del Toro's character in Last Jedi, just kind of like opportunist and kind of, but he gets her out of there and stuff. I like how they have a lot of people commented on just like a fat Jedi, which is very odd. which I appreciate the representation, but I thought he just a very. I like how he gets distracted really easily. He's like, wait, where did he go? And you can tell that May's always sending distractions to people and stuff. So I thought it was funny, but I mean, Daphne Keen's character, Jackie's kind of just she's just kind of there right now. I imagine she's going to shine in the later episodes, but outside of the main 3, I like Yord's character, but more of his personality rather than his actual line delivery. I think he's kind of just stiff. Everybody feels stiff except for Soul and the twin characters. It was really just one character, which, very kudos to her to be able to do that. But yeah, I forget her name, the one with the lightweight. We haven't seen it yet, but she's kind of just like whatever. Headland's wife. She's kind of just whatever. No really standout other than just Soul and the main 2. So mostly for me, what I'm enjoying out of the Acolyte is, of course, the martial arts. Is the mystery kind of what's going on, right? With we're 100 years removed from the Phantom Menace. And of course, I live for all the introductions of just all the kind of remember berries, as they call them. The Trade Federation in the first episode with the Neimoidians. I thought, I'm like, okay, cool. Okay, they're here. Yeah, this is before all that. The introduction, just like the different aliens. We kind of talked about that, but like the parasite thing with the mouth, Pip, which kind of reminds me a lot of what's his name, the one that Cal Kestis says on his backpack, the
BB-8.
No, not BB-8.
No, not BB-8. Why did I say that? I was so confident. I was so confidently wrong. Of course, not BB-8.
Don't you have the Lego one?
I do. Yeah. What's his name?
Anyway, it's not important. His name doesn't matter. But I love like all different lights.
BD1. Took me a second. There it was. Go. That's why I said and then BB-8, I had the B.
And then, of course, she's when she goes after her sister, she has it set to stun. We see like the big blue ring when she misses, like just the little visual details. They're like, "Oh, you're was it tech mech or mech tech or something like that?" She's like, "I thought like R2 droids are the ones who do." Think of Phantom Menace when R2 goes out there and fixes the ship and stuff. Like just those little things, just the little like things that are kind of just like winks and nods that like they don't take up too much time, but they're kind of just like if your eyes are peeled, like it's there kind of thing. So I love all that stuff with Star Wars, and then I'm still curious to see because I'm pretty sure you've seen the article or the interview where There's supposed to, besides the light whip, there's supposed to be a new like lightsaber like design
Yeah.
somewhere out there in the aether that we're gonna see at some point. And I'm just thinking like, I hope it's cool so I can get like a replica of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm largely on the same page with you. I mean, to me, there was a good deal riding on the Acolyte because it was this fresh start. It is literally the oldest thing in the canonical timeline right now. If you go on Disney Plus, it is all the way to the left. Um, uh, and so, I think that to your point, it does a good job establishing the world. And I think that that's its strongest suit right now. I think that it's an intriguing new chapter of the Star Wars universe, as you're saying. We're going to get these familiar faces, we're going to get these new touchstones. And I'm generally enjoying watching something that feels evocative of obviously what we already know about the franchise, but quite new at the same time in its mystery, in the people we're with and the dynamics they have. But I'm with you on the acting. I think the acting is fairly wooden. I think the dialogue is not phenomenal. Of course, there's exceptions to the acting and to the dialogue, but I feel like there is clearly some inexperience behind the camera and in front of it. And I think that it shows. I think that there was a lot of money put behind the Acolyte, and I just don't know if the best version of the Acolyte is getting to the screen right now. It's still a version of the Acolyte that I really, really like, and I'm really excited to see how this story develops. And I do think it's only going to get better. So as sort of a springboard, I think it is very good, but I was hoping that it would be great because all of the things there we were sort of getting pre-release about the mindset that's making the show, the creative choices being made, the production choices being made. I think it sort of set us up for, maybe this is too high of expectations on my behalf, but a sort of Andor quality production, but with more sort of Star Wars fandom than Andor has, because it doesn't have that much. And I think that the Acolyte delivers overall. And obviously the show is done. It's not like we're likely not going to see a drastic improvement to the lighting or the writing, but
they figured it out halfway through, Abram.
But I think even if the show remains at this bar of quality, it will still be probably in the top half of the Star Wars shows for me.
Oh, so, yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I getting back to what you're talking about, the inexperience, I'm thinking of how probably with the exception of Andor, because I think Andor does have a lot of big celebrity names in its cast. Star Wars kind of does the thing where they do kind of just throw in a mixture of unknowns in there with just a small pinch of established actors, right? So like Carrie-Anne Moss, I can never pronounce his name, but the guy from Squid Games who's plays Soul.
Yeah.
And I think that's about, I guess, Daphne King, but really I just know her from Logan, so I don't know if that really counts, but like it mixed in with other characters, other actors who I have no idea who they are. So that's the kind of thing that Star Wars has always kind of done. I feel like Star Wars has always tried to, know Will Smiths, know like one note kind of like not in an offensive way, but they don't want to, you don't want to be brought out of the immersion by, oh, there's so and so, right? Like Star Wars has always kind of done that, with the exception of Andor, because Andor has a phenomenal, we have what's his name, Andy Serkis, and one of the Skarsgård. I can remember. There's like so many. I forget their names, but so, and I think that kind of goes with the good and the bad. Using unknowns, you don't know exactly how it's going to pan out, and you're already so far into production, you can't just replace everybody or whatever. So you kind of just have to make the best of a situation. So, but yeah, I'm excited. I mean, like you said, if it just maintains this quality of, I feel like so far the show has done a good job of answering questions and introducing even more questions, which I really like when Star Wars does that. I love the political stuff, but I also kind of like just, the basic storytelling where they do like, here's an answer to that thing. Oh, but now there's this other thing that's going on. Let's find out what's going on. So if they just maintain that, I think it'd be pretty hard. Well, I shouldn't say it's pretty hard, but like I have a feeling it's not going to go down to like Book of Boba Fett levels. It's just not going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of can't, because as far as I know, although it could be wrong, isn't Leslie Headland largely directing the whole series?
I believe
Uh,
so.
yeah, I don't know if anybody else is jumping behind the camera. I mean, obviously, The Mandalorian was a scattershot of different
Hmm.
people taking various episodes, and sometimes that really worked, like season one. But then I think when they were trying to tell a more cohesive story, uh, it really didn't.
And I think it makes sense to do that because this is like her brainchild. Like this was
Yeah,
her pitch. The show was her pitch to Kathleen Kennedy, and like it's very. I feel like just through the interviews and everything, it's very clear that she is the one overseeing the
yeah,
entire thing, and so I'm sure she's involved in all the minutia of everything from introducing lightsabers to even. Did you see the thing about her trying to get certain lines in and they kind of fought her on?
oh really?
Getting she really wanted I have a bad feeling about this to be in there in this, and they're like I guess the Lucasfilm team was kind of like we don't know if it really fits the situation. She's like please let me use a line, like she's very much like this is her like baby. And so I again I have no prior knowledge of what she's done, but I as
Yeah.
if she really is as big of a Star Wars fan as she is, I feel like she hopefully knows what makes good Star Wars at this point. So
Yeah, I'm very excited to see her finish this show, and then I think she's going to be a really strong creative force for the series moving forward. And I think they need a couple people. I think they need a team really taking a look at Star Wars, because even at the MCU clearly is starting to heave under the weight of just Kevin Feige running it. Um, and I think that there's a chance that Dave Filoni could find himself in similarly troubled waters at a certain point. So I think that if you have these strong voices like Leslie Headland that are turning out at least really good stuff to start with, that good stuff is only going to become great the longer she works in the universe. So
and then
we'll see.
You guys never finished the entitled Marvel show, so the project. So clearly it collapsed under its weight just like that.
It did. Well, you know what, Andrew? Any day now we're going to post a review of Ant-Man and the Wasp. Unless did we do that one? I don't fucking remember. I think I watched it, so I certainly hope we reviewed it because that was so fucking boring. But
honestly, I really just to be a little just serious for a second. I really hope this show does well, because if it doesn't, Abram, if this show doesn't do well, I'm talking about critics wise, but also just viewership. I'm worried that Lucasfilm will never try to stray away from the Skywalker stuff again, and because this is like the first really experimental live action thing we've got that hasn't been built on some backbone of prior knowledge of the Empire or anything like that. And I want it, if it fails, hopefully it's for some other reason than not being tied to the Skywalkers in some way.
Yeah.
So I really hope it does well, just because I don't want, if it does bad, Lucasfilm is going to be like scared off from ever trying anything like this again, I think. So, and also just a lot of people have just been, a lot of the online negativity surrounding not just the Acolyte, but Star Wars in general, about people complaining about Ahsoka and people finding Andor to somehow be a snooze fest, which I highly disagree. But Star Wars has been, like, I think you mentioned it before, but Star Wars has been a very easy front facing punching bag for Disney. And let this be good. Let this continue to be good, please.
And everybody, we are back. We are back for chunk 2 of our big, massive, comprehensive review of The Acolyte. Andrew and I have now seen episodes 3, 4, and 5. Or, in my opinion, episode 3, and then episode 4, part 1, and episode 4, part 2. But we'll get into how the show is sort of progressing. Andrew, I'm curious, just 40,000 feet again, this next portion of the show, episodes 3 to 5, how are you feeling about them? How has it sort of changed your thoughts on The Acolyte from episodes 1 and 2? Where are you at in general?
For the most part, the theories were right in terms of the identity of the stranger. This show continues to do the thing where, like, it'll answer a question and then introduce new questions for you. So now we know the stranger, or Darth Teeths, as the internet has taken to calling him. And now there's a greater question now about what is this darkness that Soul has? What is the past about Soul that's kind of hinted that there's some kind of connection between him and the stranger, and Osha's kind of now like she's starting to question, if the narrative that she's received from Soul about what happened is true or not. and we, the audience, are now kind of wondering too, like, what is the greater mystery here beyond, what is the overall plot, not plot, but what is the overall, what's the conclusion we're heading to in this show is kind of what I'm wondering about, because I really thought we were gonna get the identity like further in, like episode 7 or 8, and now it's kind of like, well, now what? Like, will they leave? Like, where is Soul going? Like, are we gonna get the answers on the ship? Like he kept saying like twice, like, I'll answer everything like once we get back to the ship. I'll answer it once we get back to the ship. So, but overall, episode 3 was kind of a weird. Let's go do like some exposition kind of stuff, And I remember you did tell me like, oh yeah, like I think we're gonna see more of Andara just because like there's like scenes that we haven't seen with her yet, and that's where we got those. A lot of I think that was the episode probably people were most pressed about in terms of the retconning of the Immaculate Conception with the Force, and just the why are the Jedi bad now? They're putting like a negative light and all this other stuff. People not liking the name of the thread for the Force, which is silly because the Force has actually had more than just one name in like before, like in the old EU and other stuff like that. Even if you remember, Abram, when we did the Visions, remember when we did the recap, we did the Visions review going through all the episodes. Like there was one episode where like these natives of this planet knew what the Force was, but they referred to it by like a different name, and they treated it differently as kind of more like a sort of druid kind of understanding of it. And so yeah, I'm sorry, I'm kind of like all over the place right now, but I'll go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, you touch on a lot that I want to delve into in more detail. I don't know. I really don't know what to think of the Acolyte. The more I watch it, so I want to get you said to me yesterday you want to get into all this sort of the discourse, and as you're saying, what people are pressed about, and I do too. I think kind of the problem, at least for me, like watching episode 3 of the Acolyte, is I just don't think it's very good on like by its own merit, and I think I think that based on where I feel that the shortcomings in the script writing and acting are, I think it opens itself up for easy criticism. That then sort of has the door open wide enough for a lot of bad faith criticism to come in with what I think is kind of a more fair critique of the show.
Sort of like a co-opting of the fandom in a way to kind of just...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And I just feel like the acting is not particularly strong. I feel like the script is really all over the place. As soon as I kind of realized we were doing like the coconut shell game with May and Osha at the end of episode 5, I kind of groaned a little bit. I don't know. I feel like I'm having a hard time really getting into the Acolyte, but I will also say that I do think with episode 5 in particular, we're finally gaining some good momentum. We're narrowing down in ways that we'll talk about, narrowing down the cast to just a few set characters that have a pretty defined set of relationships and intrigues among them. So I think that's effective, and I love the Stranger. Maybe the coolest Sith character ever.
So cool.
I knew when I started episode 5, it pops up in the corner like PG-13 for intense violence, and the previous episode had been like PG-13 for moderate violence. I'm like, what's gonna happen here? And then
really? They actually like define the difference? Okay, I didn't know that.
So I was like, okay, so what's gonna happen? And then I really was not ready for exactly what was gonna happen. And we'll get to it. We'll get to the Stranger, but let's start with episode 3. Let's get into that now that we've both had some time to reflect on it, to reflect on where Osha and May come from. There's a lot that I like about this, a lot that I don't. But what do you make of where these two grew up?
So it's very clear, all female Force Witch coven, and they're clearly trying to be kept off the radar. I remember right away we're introduced to I guess Ocean may have two mothers. There's one they call mother, and then there's one they call mama. So that's how they.
Yeah.
I think mama's the Zabrak, the one with like the spikes on her head, kind of, and then the mother is the other. She's kind of like the head of the whole area. She has like the really cool like hair puddle. Yeah. And they have like these like spirally like tattoos kind of thing going on, which seems to be important somewhere. I don't know yet how, but like whenever like it shows up later in episode 5 and 6, there's like ominous music that plays when the camera focuses on them. So I guess we'll find out more about that. But yeah, we have this like witch coven that's trying to keep off the radar, and they're preparing. We find out that Ocean may have very different feelings about like this. I don't know if it was called an ascension, or I don't know what it was called. Like
yeah,
some kind of
the
ritual.
ascension.
Okay, that they were going to deal with. And they're inseparable. And then we hear that phrase again from the previous episode from 2, where they talk about it's like a poem or a nursery rhyme about one or two in one. I forgot what the phrase was, but it was like one, like you are me and me are you.
Yeah.
Or all that. So like, okay, we kind of, that's been like instilled in them since they were like young and early. And there's like a couple, kind of jumping around here because this is the one I did not rewatch this one, so I'm trying to remember, but there's implication that the mothers did something that was considered unconventional in their creating these twins, and it's kind of like it sounds like it's dark, and immediately like I'm thinking of like, oh, like Anakin's not the only one to have an immaculate conception. I'm like, okay, like this is kind of interesting, like where we're going with this. And immediately my mind kind of goes to like the EU stuff where with like Plagueis and how I don't know if you ever read Darth Plagueis' book, but he talks about where he gets the idea of the immaculate conception from somebody else, from like some other older source or something. So it makes me wonder if there's going to be some kind of, especially of where this takes place timeline wise, if there's going to be some kind of connection. But back to episode 3. They're preparing for this ascension, but Osha's like not sure she really wants to do this. She doesn't care. She doesn't want to grow up to be like a witch. They say the word witch. And so, yeah. And then we have like a little seminar where the mother's explaining how they call it the thread, how you pull the thread, right? Pull the thread. It's basically just another version of the Force. And eventually at some point we have Jedi who show up. They drop all this like rules or laws about like there's children here, and it's kind of like that's an interesting question. And then like, oh well, we have to be allowed to like test them, and it's like, oh okay, this is something like I've read and seen stuff like in like the books and stuff, and never like addressed directly. Like if you remember in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, Obi-Wan talks about like how he's like, oh yeah, like I was picked up, like the Jedi took me like from my parents like very early. He's like, I might have had a brother, I don't remember, right? So like very early, and we find out more about the sorry, I lost my train of thought. The kind of circumstances of May and Osha being older than what a traditional Jedi youngling would be, and the mother does some kind of weird like force witchcraft on a young Torben, and he like his eyes just go pitch black, and he's like, I was like, oh my god, am I watching like some kind of like possession movie or something? Like I was like, are we going into like The Omen or something here? But and then she says like something about like if you don't leave or something like we're gonna kill him or something or something along the lines of that. And so they kind of like back off, but they're like, okay, but we still want to test them. Like, all right, like, we'll send them to tomorrow to like wherever you are. And then, that'll be just to satisfy them, right? Just to kind of avoid any further conflict. And so we have the whole thing where the mothers are telling them to fail on purpose. And the Jedi, they're kind of clever. They kind of look out for, they do like the whole, like the thing from episode 1 where like you have like the little monitor and like, only you can see. And what do you see now? What do you see now? Right. And they tell her, oh, okay. It's implied that May fails, right? She fails on purpose. And then Osha is not so good at failing, even though she is trying to fail on purpose. She's a little more clumsy. And she's like, wait, that's not correct. And then like Soul's kind of like, oh, like she knows like that was incorrect, right? And so we have like the whole thing where she's like, what do you want, right? And then quickly this episode comes about like, what do you want for yourself? Like you have to choose for yourself your like own destiny. Like if you don't want to do this, and like let us know and stuff, right? So that pressure's put on her. We get back to she goes back to her family, and then they're kind of pissed. They're a little bit upset that she didn't lie on her sister's Matt. May is really pissed off that she's like, hey, like we're supposed to be in this together, yada yada. And then she goes back to her room, and May locks her in her room. And this is where things kind of get fuzzy because it seems like we have different accounts of what exactly happened. But we clearly see she does start a fire right there in her room, locks her in. And then we have the whole thing with her. She can't get out. She won't open the door. She finds like another exit through behind some stuff. The fire spreads out. And then we get to her going through the vents, kind of, Metal Gear Solid style, gets out. And we hear an explosion, a bunch of women shouting, right? And we're kind of left to wonder, like, how did the fire, kind of get there? Clearly, we're missing some context. I think there's more info we're missing here.
Yeah.
And we just get to the part where May and Osha are on the opposite ends of a broken bridge. And Soul comes to save Osha, and May kind of tumbles down, and there's, bodies never recovered. Therefore, we get to, and I think that's kind of how it ends. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I mean, just the last thing that happens is that we sort of flush forward a little bit, and we're traveling to Coruscant. Osha wakes up on the table, and Soul comforts her. Yeah, I don't know. So this is where it gets tricky for me, Andrew, because you're right to bring up the notion that Immaculate Conception is not a new concept for Star Wars. So I think a lot of the anger around this online is bad faith in that this is a pre-established concept. People just don't like it this time because it's sort of like a minority lesbian couple who are having these kids, which I think is unfortunate. I think that a lot of the discourse on the show is totally unfortunate, unfounded, and I think a lot of the retconning that people are talking about is just, I don't think it's that serious. I think my problems with this episode are a fewfold. For one, I don't sadly think that the kid who plays Osha and May is particularly great.
No. Yeah.
And that's ultimately, you can only put so much blame on a child actor like that, right?
Yeah.
They're given not only a lot of heavy scenes to try to carry, but they're given a lot of heavy scenes that don't really feel like they're built up very well, and the dialogue doesn't really feel tuned quite properly for kids. And so I think about the moment like when Moshe and May are arguing and they're about Jedi are good, Sith are bad, or whatever, blah, 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 blah. Or no, Jedi are good, Jedi are bad. That's the two percentages they take. And then the mom is like, no, it's actually about power and who wields it. Now, I think that that's an interesting idea, and that is ultimately what the show is trying to do. But like, if you put yourself in the mind of this scene, right? These two kids are arguing about concepts they don't really grasp, and the mom is saying something more to the audience than to the kids. I don't think that the writing or the general situation of this plot in this episode gives the kids a lot of very authentic material to work with. Mm-hmm. So I think through that lens, it's kind of boring, frankly. I feel like the Cliff Notes version of this episode gets me everything I need as a viewer, because I don't think it's executed particularly well. I do love the scene when the Jedi arrive to try to take away Osha and May, because it gets to, as you were mentioning, this really uncomfortable and previously largely taken for granted notion that, yeah, when you're a kid, the Jedi swoop in, they grab you, and they give you this life at the academy, right? That doesn't seem super nefarious until you can start to seem like this, when parents obviously don't want their kids essentially under penalty of like Republic intervention taken away from them. I think that's really good. And that scene really is the highlight of the episode for me. But otherwise, it just feels ill-constructed. I really don't understand the nature of the relationship between Soul and Osha. I think that the quickness of the bond developed between them feels quite peculiar to me. I have a hard time with that. It feels very fast. It's sort of my same issue with the general setup of this whole colony. We do so much in 1 hour. It kind of reminds me of the episode from Mandalorian season 3 on Coruscant with Katie O'Brien. I forget what her name is, but it's with the Imperial people who are being reconditioned on Coruscant. Yeah. It's really cool. There's a lot of good stuff in there, but it's like a one and done little thing. And in both cases, it really breaks the pace too. I mean, we had a lot of good forward momentum. And episode 2, we're arriving to find the Wookiee master, but instead of doing that for 99% of the episode, we're doing this digression. So I just think that as a viewer, a lot of the writing didn't work for me. And this episode is probably the worst one of the 5, I think.
Yeah, I do. I think I think you put it pretty well, that the issues with the show are not the issues that most of us are hearing online, like which are completely separate. Like there is valid issues with the show, like you said, like we've talked about this before, where like kid acting, like you think of like young Anakin, where like the earnestness doesn't always land, like the dialogue, it just feels very kind of like this is not how a kid would speak, kind of thing, right? But then again, if the way kids speak in real life doesn't translate so well to like screen, True. Right? It would be a lot of like filler and nonsense, just like in real life. So you kind of have to just push the story on somehow. And I think a lot of it feels stilted. And then obviously, like the best character so far in the entire show for me is, well, we're gonna get to him obviously eventually, but just everybody else kind of just feels very, I don't know. I actually think the mother, I forgot her name, but I think I like her. I do like her personality and kind of her, because she's much more level-headed than the rest of them, especially her partner. I do like kind of how she talks. She's like very strict at the beginning, but towards the end, she's a little more kind of giving, like things are not as black and white as you would think, kind of thing. And I think she's like the other standout. But yeah, I mean, everybody else kind of just feels like I don't know if they're phoning it in exactly. But I don't know if it's like the dialogue they're given, or they're just kind of they're just there, like Jecki, Yord. Everyone's just kind of like, this is what we got to do. We got like 30-40 minutes to do it. Like, let's get it done. So I agree with you. I do think we are kind of being pulled in different directions in terms of like there's no overarching like plot. I feel like we're kind of, I mean, there is a plot, but the whole thing with her hunting down like these masters, to what end, we're still not really sure to what end that's going to accomplish exactly. And she kind of like, I mean, we're not to episode 4 or 5 yet, but it just feels like we solve kind of one thing and then another thing's introduced, and we saw one. There's no overarching like story. And I mean, Andor kind of did that, but I feel like Andor, at least in the background, had something going on besides just the little individual 3-episode arcs, because we had the stuff with like Mon Mothma, and we had the stuff back on Andor's home planet with his mom and stuff. Like there was other things. We had characters who were still working there. I forgot the guy's name, the very by the book incompetent guy. I forgot his name. But like there was characters who were doing things in the background for the overall story. While we don't really have that. We don't know what's going on with the council. We don't know what's going on Coruscant, really. We don't know like what's going on with what's her name? I know we're going to see it eventually because we haven't seen the lightsaber whip, but like we don't know what's going on with the greater narrative now. We're like, are the Sith out? Are they not out? Like it's kind of just all over. It is all over the place. And like, what does it mean to the end of taking out the masters? Like, then what? Like, what's that going to accomplish? So I agree with you. It is kind of murky.
Yeah, it's you've raised a lot of good points of comparison. I mean, to raise one that's totally outside of Star Wars, one of my favorite seasons of television ever is a mystery. It's True Detective season 1. And the thing about True Detective is you're always building towards an overarching mystery, and there is reward along the way, but to your point, you have sort of this guiding star, what you're going to get at the end of the show. We don't really have that here, because to give another example of where I think the show is faltering, even in episode 5, which I loved, the swapping of Osha and May's positions, we don't actually even get time to wonder if that's what's happened, because almost immediately after it's implied, we have what's his name, not the Wanderer,
the Stranger.
The stranger arrives over Osha's body, who has been stripped. She's been stripped of her garb it's very obvious then, okay, that this is Osha's body on the ground. May is pretending to be Osha. We don't even have time to really sit with any threads. We're given answers almost as soon as problems are set up. And so I think when you have this pace, that's constantly one thing's put in front of you, and then it's resolved in front of you, resolved, so on and so forth. It's very easy to lose sight of the larger story when it is, as you're saying, meandering. I don't think particularly well set up, and it seems like in some ways inconsequential at this point. Like it ultimately, like, yeah, I want to know what's going on with May. I want to know why she's trying to kill the Masters. I want to know what kind of darkness is within Soul. But that all kind of seems like small potatoes when you're talking about the fact that Osha has now been kidnapped by the Sith who's come out of the woodwork. Like, it almost feels like the stakes of the narrative are no longer important because there's this much bigger, much more pressing threat. And I think that speaks to what you're saying, Andrew, which is, you know, the identity of the stranger has been revealed about halfway through the show. So now, where does that leave us? And how quickly is Soul going to discover that May is with him? I don't know. And it also, again, makes me question the nature of the relationship between Osha and Soul. If Soul can be so easily tricked, this master who's supposed to be very attuned with the Force, is this because May is particularly deceptive, or because Soul is maybe off of his game? I guess we're gonna have to find out. But I'm a little bit skeptical of what's kind of being set up now.
Yeah, I because I'm thinking of like when he shows up, that when the stranger shows up and I mean, the same thing happened earlier in the show where he recognized right away, like, you do look like her. Like it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's just again, they're doing the same thing, and it does. And like clearly, again, is he just sharper than Soul, or is Osha just really bad at concealing her presence in the Force, or is May just like, it is confusing. And I mean, you could probably chalk it up to like, oh well, they're twins, so maybe they have extremely similar. I don't know, but then he can like. It's implied that the stranger knows that Soul can kind of read minds and stuff, and then we do see Soul do that in the second episode, I think, where he does that to May. So like he can clearly do it again, right? Yeah. So like what are we going towards? And then like what is it? Where are they gonna go? I'm trying to think like what's the next point of conflict that's gonna bring them back together again? Because it sounds like, okay, like Soul's just all right, I guess we're going to go back. We're going to leave this planet. For what's going to happen next? He's going to go report the deaths. Like, what's he going to do? What's May's end game of being wrapped up and going with him? Like, what is she going to accomplish? Or what's her next goal? We don't even know what her next goal is. We don't know what Osha is going to be stuck. And she's clearly going to be, I imagine as soon as she wakes up, she's going to realize what happened. And she's probably going to give herself away if the stranger doesn't already know it's her. And then what? Is he going to bargain? Is he going to propose like a hostage exchange? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like we're kind of just out here in the dark with no real guidance to like what we're heading towards.
Yeah, and on one hand, like that can make for like a good mystery, but I also think a good mystery is grounded in really solid clues, and I kind of think that's what we're lacking. But there's one character that's been introduced that's actually going to be of a lot of utility in uncovering May's little deceit here.
Basil.
That is a small man named Basil, who I love. He is just a weird little guy. He's introduced
adorable.
He's like an otter. Yeah. He is brought with us to not Kashyyyk so we can track down May. He's a searcher, or he's gonna find
the tracker.
Yeah, he's a tracker who's gonna find the Wookiee master, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so. He's doing his own thing. He's chirping and he's running around the forest and he's leading us to major plot points. But he knows that May is being deceptive. And as somebody pointed out on Twitter, so I can't take credit for this, but with Yord's neck snapped, there's nobody to translate for Basil. So Basil has this information that, he has to portray to Soul somehow. Hey, that's May right there. Now, in reality, I think he could just tug on his sleeve and be like, point at it enough and he'll get it across. But I really like this character who I thought would be of no significance turning out to be at least somebody of moderate plot significance for at least the next episode. What did you sort of think of Basil, of the hunt to find the Wookiee master, and sort of everything that transpires in episode 4?
Basil is adorable. I feel like he's the Porg, he's the Ewok, he's the
Yeah.
that thing of this show, the Grogu of this show. Like such a funny looking critter too. Like he's just like he has like these very expressive eyes and like a little sniffing, and like I like how I can't remember Pip. Pip does a little squirting thing. He's like all befuddled and just a very adorable character. I like how he kind of just wanders off, right?
Yeah.
Osha asks about like he or they, because she doesn't know exactly what it is, and so she's like who's like what is like, oh, that's Basil. It's like oh, and then they're just talking to Yor. She's like oh, like what's that Basil for? He's like, Basil is his name. He says like it's not what he is, it's his name. And like, oh, he's a tracker, he's gonna go find Kelnaka for us. And like I like how they keep losing track of him, like he gets ahead of them and just like does his own thing. He has like his little glasses so he can just sniff.
Yeah.
He has like to block his view, so he just goes off his smell rather than his vision. I think that's kind of funny. And he's just a little guy. He's a little cute little guy sniffing around, trying to find specific people at different times. So I like how he's just kind of going around. But yeah, he seems like he's just in the background. And apparently now he is kind of he's going to be going forward, play a more pivotal role. I like his design. It's like a little otter badger kind of hybrid, because he kind of has like the dark lines that kind of remind me of a badger. Yeah, I'm curious. I think Yor makes a point to mention how like when everybody else was learning Shri Wook, which is like the Wookiee language, like he's like, I learned something more nuanced, he said, which is our little friend here. But yeah, I imagine like you said, he's gonna play a bigger role going forward. At least like you said for the next episode. But yeah, I think and I know you've talked about this before, where the jadedness of being a Star Wars fan, it's like this guy's made to sell toys.
I want a Basil toy. I like him.
Right? Such a cute name too, Basil. Sounds like a butler or something. I don't know.
Yeah. What do you make of the fact that Kelnaka is killed off camera and we don't really get much from him? That was a little bit of disappointment for me. Similar to Master Andara, actually. I was really looking forward to seeing Kelnaka because I love the Wookiees. I think that it's one of the more impressive costuming jobs of the show. As well, and we see him just for a moment in action at the end of episode 2. But we actually get none of that in episodes 3 and 4. He's just gone. He's killed by the stranger.
Yeah, it kind of made me wonder if because I rewatched episode 4 and 5 today. It made me wonder if he was killed in the same span of time that the stranger was like strung up, or if it happened when May said she wanted to rest for like 10 minutes or something like that. And it made me wonder, I'm like, did he go ahead and like kill them before she got there so she wouldn't have to do it? Or did he do it once, she left him and she got the tips of where to go and she left him strung up? So I kind of did that timeline kind of, because I feel like those are two different kind of motives and those are two different things going on. Like killed him on purpose before she got there, or killed him so she would be scared, like kind of like sending a message. I think I feel like there's two different motives for what could have happened there. But yeah, it's I mean, it's not that odd. I feel like in shows or games they kind of do this where like you have like 5 or 6 targets or for something. Yeah. Usually you won't see them all like kind of die. You'll like speed through. An example of this I think of is Final Fantasy 12. There's like 5 judges. They're like the main kind of like bad guys, and like you only fight 3 of them. One of them is killed off screen, and another one is like just not even a villain towards the end. So like they kind of, I feel like kind of doing the video gamification. Like you got 5 targets, and it's like, or 4 targets or whatever, like including Soul, right? And we're like, oh, we're just gonna speed this along. I feel like they could have put that in there though, just because these episodes are really short as they are, and at the same time, I feel like they kind of. I think that shock kind of hits harder though when she's like he's here. Like when she sees it, turns around, sees like the still like smoking burnt like Slash, and like I think that kind of hits harder. Just like, oh crap. Also, kind of makes me think, and Abram, maybe you can chime in here, that maybe by getting rid of the third one, he's really forcing her to make Soul the one that she has to kill without using a weapon. Maybe. or maybe it feels like he's kind of
Yeah.
pushing her towards this inevitable outcome where she is going to have to, well, not now, maybe because she changed her motives, but I think he might have wanted her to get physical with Soul being the last target, and maybe kind of force that whole notion of like his darkness out or something. I don't know.
Yeah, this is another point where I think that the writing's just not quite doing it for me, because there's an exchange. What is his name when he's not the stranger?
Kamir.
Kamir, right? They're talking about this killing a Jedi without a weapon thing, and maybe I was not paying close enough attention, but it almost seemed like the killing the Jedi without a weapon is a descriptor of the Jedi in reality, not of her, because there's this whole idea of Kamir playing on, when he's the stranger, playing on Soul's Jedi code and Jedi law. You would strike an unarmed opponent, or you'd strike me when my back is turned to you. These various things. It almost seems like the killing a Jedi without a weapon is that the Jedi doesn't have the weapon, and so you're breaking some sort of code or principle by killing them. I don't know if they're trying to pull some sort of riddle or wordplay thing on us, but I also just generally don't really get what Kamir wants to do with May at this point, because he does very openly try to kill her in the last couple exchanges. Now, when he first strikes at her, it's just to cut the handcuffs loose.
Right.
But then later on, he's really trying to go for her, and Soul has to walk him back. But does he even care anymore? This is where I think part of the mystery is getting lost for me. We know that he wants an acolyte. He literally says that. He wants his apprentice. He wants his acolyte. But he also seemingly wants to kill his acolyte. And May seemingly doesn't want to be his acolyte anymore. So where that leaves them, where that intersects with killing Kelnaka, probably has more to do with why these Jedi Masters had to be killed in the first place. We just don't know yet. But it is kind of like all a haze for me, frankly, what their relationship is right now.
Yeah, especially because I think Soul leaves the area, and I don't think anybody other than May has visual confirmation that Kelnaka's dead. Or maybe they can just feel that he's dead. I don't know, but like no one ever goes into the hut. Well, other than Jackie, I guess. But
and Jackie gets. I don't remember if Jackie sees the body, but Jackie gets angry because May takes Kelnaka's saber. But we got to talk about Jackie. We got to talk about Yord. But let's talk about the stranger in Kamir in this larger sense, because there's two other touchstones in Star Wars that I want to reference with respect to him. The first is that Kamir and the revealing of his identity, to me, is very much, and this is totally on purpose, very much like Yoda playing this bumbling fool and annoyance to Luke on Dagobah when they first meet. Did you put that connection together?
Not the Dago. I mean, I was just thinking of just Palpatine, where they're always just right there, ever present, under your nose, kind of thing. But yeah, I definitely see. The tonal shift in their character is very apparent. Yes, because again, watching it again today, like Kamir's very like just watching his subtleties that when they arrive on that planet. And like they're packing their stuff. He like purposely or I guess now in hindsight, purposely he fumbles and like knocks over a bag, and he quickly ducks down to pick it up. When he's walking with May, and they're coming around like this mountain bend, and he's like, "Hey, like, what do you think that whole thing is about killing a Jedi without a weapon? Are you allowed to steal his weapon and use it, or you just can't use one yourself? Like he's very much." Kind of playing up the idiot kind of thing with his exchanges with her, and she asks it's like why are you following him, like what, like he saved my life once. He's like, I'm just one of those people that he collects characters or collects people, and just he's always it's very clear that he's playing a completely even his vocal inflections when he talks, like when May sees him for the first time, he's like, hello, like his voice goes back to the Kamir voice, and then he quickly goes back to being the stranger voice, right? Like the way his vocal, like the subtleties in his voice change, and So, but that, yeah, I guess that, yeah, you're right. Yoda does kind of fumble around, but he's kind of just trying to get a vibe for Luke in terms of his patience and all that stuff. So I could see he does, like, he warns her too, like when she ties him up in the little noose right upside down, and she's like, I'm done, like I'm leaving, and he's like, he'll kill you, like he like
Yeah.
he's kind of like, are you like still like holding on to like his disguise, not revealing himself yet, right? So like, but yeah, you're right. I mean, I kind of just saw Palpatine, really, kind of just the
Sure.
unassuming, person who's just there, and yeah, there's a connection there, but he won't like reveal it kind of thing. So,
Yeah,
but yeah,
I think you're right that it's both. It's the calculation of Palpatine, but it's also I just because Kamir is just bumbling and mischievous, I see notes of Yoda whacking on R2 with his cane and trying to eat Luke's food and everything. So I think that Leslie Headland is really nicely to what we're both talking about, playing to these different influences. But he's revealed. He appears, he does a force push, episode ends. I would have been pissed off, except for the fact that I was behind. I caught up on 4 and 5 in the same day.
lucky,
So
lucky.
I had no week long wait for that.
Yeah, that was rough. I got into the Discord channel. I'm like, really? We gotta wait for a week after that? And even Stefan was he's like, oh, that was a good one. It's like, oh man, I can't believe you have to wait now. And like, that's dirty, man. Because that
Yeah.
episode's only 35 minutes long. They could have made it longer if they wanted to, but they didn't. And I know they did that on purpose. But like, because that's the shortest episode in the so far of the 5 episodes, and I'm like, that's dirty.
I'm a
So,
bit worried about how short, especially the 4 and 5 are. It makes me wonder if there's really actually, because there could conceivably be only 90 more minutes a show. I mean, I would assume that we'll have some longer episodes for 6, 7, and 8, but in theory they could be 30 minutes each.
or it could be 3 hours, almost 3 hours.
It could
It's
be.
so weird. Yeah, that's like a big range. Yeah, that's true.
But episode 5 begins, and here's the comparison I want to throw out to you for this, Andrew. Because we see the stranger just murder Jedi in a way that
Jesus.
I don't think we've ever so explicitly seen in live action.
Yeah.
But it reminded me a lot of what I think is one of the great episodes of the Clone Wars microseries, when General Grievous has cornered all of those Jedi and he's killing them one by one. I think that there is a similar amount of danger cultivated by both these characters, and they're both obviously fan favorites. Everybody immediately loved the stranger, and I think it's for good reason. I think that you're just not used to seeing Jedi die that quickly, and when so many Jedi arrive on the planet in episode 4, I was saying, okay, we're gonna do a General Grievous, we're gonna do a 5 people show up to confront Palpatine, 4 get killed immediately, and it's just a Mace Windu versus Palpatine battle. We're gonna do that again, and we do. We just give the stranger time to
multiple times. Yeah.
we give him time to stab Jedi through when he force pulls 2 onto his blade,
The shish
to impale
kebab.
them, taking heads off, and then using his braces and his helmet to shut down lightsabers. I mean, it's just Andrew, it's just incredible. What did you think about all this stuff?
It is, yeah. Just the amount of I had to rewatching it today. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like he fights so and so, or like that fight happens, because there's like breaks in between the fights throughout the episode. But yeah, the way I was so confused at first. I was very confused. I was watching the first time where I'm like, is he? Because I missed the head bash, but I'm like, is he like? I thought he was cutting the hilts. At first, I thought he was cutting the hilts of the lightsabers, and they were just like, kind of like how Anakin in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, when his gets like chopped, and he kind of like, it's just, you see the sparks and that's it. I'm like, oh, yeah. He's just like really good at targeting like the hilts. But then like when they're like whacking the blue and yellow lightsabers, the 2 nameless Jedi, and then it turns back on, I'm like, oh, like no, he's like short circuiting them. And then that's when I was like, oh, this like kind of the EU moment kind of popped in my head, like, oh, cortosis, which is like it shows up in some of the books, shows up in the comics, shows up in, I don't know if you ever played the Obi-Wan Kenobi game for Xbox. It's a green cover. The cortosis is like they're like Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan go on a mission to a planet to like shut down this mining facility, and they explain why that material is like it short circuit. It's like brittle. It's not like super strong like Beskar. It's not like that good, but it has a unique property where it basically just like shuts down, it short circuits lightsabers. So like the way he uses it offensively, like, and then later on when Yor does it to him back, so we're forced to have the hand, just like, but yeah, like his aggressiveness where he like willingly like does the head bash to short, like uses his gauntlet or his brace, and he does the constantly throughout the fight, he's like turning off his lightsaber, reigniting it like at key moments, and just like the way he fights is just so cool. Very, very aggressive, very kind of like, you can see these Jedi are not equipped to handle, not, first of all, not only just someone who's another lightsaber user, but someone who can fundamentally disarm them for a moment of time, right? And they're just like I can imagine like his mannerisms, dude, when he just floats down quietly in the background, and it's like immediately like the horror vibes kind of set in. Even the way where like because he has the mask on, like he's like there's a point where it's just him and Soul in the middle of the forest when like he cuts down the trees with his like spinning lightsaber, and he kind of just like tilts his head, kind of like how a horror character like in a movie would, where he just kind of like doesn't say anything, just kind of like Jason or something, you know what I mean? Like he just has these, and the very unsettling teeth, not teeth, but like they look like teeth, and just the whole like he is a terrifying visage to see, kind of like how Darth Maul is with the the tattoos and the spikes, but here it's more like mystery. Like you can't see his expression, just how you can't see Darth Vader and such. But like there is a general like the sense of how he just quietly floats down. Yeah. And then like they little one by one start turning around as they feel like the darkness like nearby. Like he sets the stage, and like I'm like he's clearly that kind of person who like when he has no time, like he's like, how would I take on it? Like how would I make an entrance kind of thing? You know what I mean? Like there is a sense of dread when he's in there, and then like we see the massive force wave, cut to black. Next episode, we're kind of desensitized. We don't know what's going on. We're Osha's like not sure what's going on. She turns to her side and immediately sees a dead Jedi next to her. That like shocks her. And then as the camera pans out, you see the streaks in the ground of where he pushed them kind of fan out. And then you just hear lightsabers, and then she turns to the side, and you just see he's just sweeping and swooping low and zigzagging, and just like he's going to work, man. And just the different ways, like you said, the different ways he slices someone in the belly, does the shish kebab maneuver. Like I think he decapitates them right as like the tree kind of covers the moment it happens. Like he is ruthless. And then of course the reveal of how his lightsaber works when we get to the unfortunate death of Jackie with he kind of does a thing that like Cal Kestis does in Jedi Survivor when you get that upgrade for the double blade. But instead of it coming from the bottom of the hilt, it's like a lightsaber hilt within a lightsaber hilt kind of thing. And just like three, like a bowling, like the holes in a bowling ball, Abram. Like the holes in a bowling ball, just. And I'm like, what? Like this dude's insane. He holds that cool pose, Abram. He holds that cool pose, right? Lifts his head, deactivates his lightsabers, right? Then Soul has like the you moment, right? And that cold exchange, Abraham, where he's like, she was just a child. He says, Jackie, and he's like, oh, was that its name? Like he doesn't give a damn about anything. And then she was just a child. And he's like, you brought her here. And I was like, oh man, like he doesn't care about anything.
Yeah, I echo everything you said, and one other thing just on his design I wanna nail in on is it's just so simple. That's what I really love about it. What I love about him is that he is just anathema to everything the Jedi know. He's just dressed in black. He just has this foreboding, horrifying mask on, as you say, and then he fights in a way that is, because obviously there's styles to lightsaber combat. There's very distinct combat styles that you're supposed to fight within. Yord remarks, because Yord is injured by him on the first bout, he's like, he doesn't fight in any way we know. The idea that very simply, Kamir is just this extremely powerful and ruthless combatant that is incredibly good at combat, but also just unwilling to be stuck to the prescribed Jedi rules. The way he becomes a danger to them ideologically as well as physically, I think is extremely interesting. Mm-hmm. The exchange where he says, well, you brought Jackie here, was absolutely true. I mean, it's something I thought about. I think I reflected on in our discussion of Ahsoka. how young Ahsoka looks when she's marching into battle in Clone Wars, how Jedi Padawan seems so much younger in live action, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, to bring Jackie on this mission, I kept thinking to myself, well, she couldn't die here, surely. I mean, she's just a little kid, and then boom, 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 stabbed 3 times in the chest, in like the solar plexus. It's just very violent for Star Wars, and I think it illustrates these shortcomings of the Jedi Order that Leslie Headland has been talking about, underpinning the entire show. We have Kamir here as this very simple, very bold, in their face rebuke of how Jedi operate entirely. And then to snap Yord's neck, too.
Ooh.
I have my head on my hands for that one because you don't do that in Star Wars. You don't have
No, you don't.
a dark side force user snap somebody's neck like that and just throw their body aside.
You do it from long range. You do it from long range.
Yeah, it's very personal. It's very brutal. It speaks to, I think, the action influences of wuxia combat that was being brought in here. This incredible hand-to-hand martial arts action, then this more heightened wuxia action, and then this just sort of more thematic underpinning across the entire show. I really found it brilliant, and I love, as we've talked about already, the way that we dance between Kamir and Stranger as these two identities that play off of each other throughout all the encounters. I just think it was basically the perfect introduction to this character, and all of these shows invite a problem of, well, what happens to new characters? They must inevitably die or be phased out before the events of the saga. But I really hope we have more than just 2 or 3 more episodes with him, because I just think he's exceptional. I really, really love this character.
Yeah, he's badass. He's got those cool, like, he has like this interesting outfit where he kind of has like a gi. It's kind of like a gi he has on top,
Yeah,
with a V neck, and then he has kind of like these like parachute samurai pants thing going on where each leg is like a separate, kind of like bell bottoms in a way, but very kind of flared out. The overall look is very samurai esque. I kind of like, and then just like the like this like disheveled, just like this disheveled grungy kind of look, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of the first episode of Visions, where we see that Sith he's not, we don't know if he's a Sith, but the samurai with the lightsaber, right? It kind of reminded me a lot of that. And then when he gets temporarily his lightsaber gets knocked out by Yord, when he picks up his helmet and uses it against him to knock it to, like, just, and they're both like that, right, with their like lightsabers disarmed, and he quickly gets rid of Yord. But then we have Soul go in, and they both are forced to use hand-to-hand that whole sequence where it's just Soul and Kira just going back and back. He like, Soul does this thing where I forgot, he like drops him, and then he like kicks him forcefully and sends him flying, like, with his kick, and just like it is just, I would dare anybody to complain about that episode for any given reason. I mean there's I'm sure there's complaints about the switcheroo at the end and stuff, but like, that's like that's the great unifier, Abram. Like, whether you care about like social justice or whatever, like, a good lightsaber fight is gonna shut up everybody. and we definitely got that too, just that whole exchange. I love when Jackie's constantly like, she uses the pommel to like bust him in the face to like knock off the helmet. That whole in that sequence too, she kind of, what it reminds me of, when she does she has Kalnaka's lightsaber and he quickly disables it, and then he goes in, the stranger goes in for the kill, and then she takes out her other lightsaber, and then when she turns on the second one, it kind of reminds me of, if you remember in Attack of the Clones, when Anakin's dual wielding against Count Dooku at the end, kind of thing, like the quick flurry and stuff and all that. And just also, I really like the lightsaber design of having the if you notice when he takes it out, the base is wider than like the top part, because it has to be basically screwed into like the other lightsaber, just like the idea of how it's not like a double bladed, but it's just like it's a blade within a blade. I'm like, okay, that's the lightsaber she was talking about, the lightsaber design she said she wanted to that she had to fight the producers to get in there. So it was well worth it.
I agree. And I mean, that's just sort of how I feel about episode 5 as a whole. I mean, I think the highs and the lows are all worth it, not just for the fight, not just for the introduction of the stranger, but for the narrowing of the field. Jackie and Yord were interesting, but didn't really have a whole lot to add. Really, the relationships here are between Osha, May, Soul, and Kamir.
Mhm.
That's really all that the story needs at this point. So I think sacrificing them, I guess, quote unquote, for the not only for the function of illustrating the power of the stranger, but to make the plot kind of inherently whittled down to its most essential components does give me some hope that despite everything we've said about, you know, it being unclear how the mysteries are unfolding, what's next, it at least gives me hope that we're now just down to the essential elements. So I remain excited to see what comes next, Andrew. And I think just sort of as we're coming out of our discussion of these 3 episodes, as we look ahead to, I think we'll probably just do one final recording after the last 3 episodes. As we look ahead to the last chunk of the show before we reconvene and we share this with the community and everything. I find myself wondering, and it would be fun to revisit this question again for the last bit, wondering whether the Acolyte's really living up to what I thought it was going to be. Because obviously we've talked a lot on this show and just in general about our excitement for the Acolyte. And I don't know. I think the show has been messier than I sort of thought or hoped it would be. But I remain hopeful with such interesting characters and failing everything else, a lot of material to pull from that we wrap it up in an interesting way. So would you say right now, as sort of a midpoint check, that you are cooler on the Acolyte now than you were after the premiere episodes? Would you say that it's about the same level for you, or are we kind of improving as we ramp up towards the conclusion?
Well, okay. So the way I feel so far, 5/8, right? 5/8 of the way through the show. What I wanted out of the show is not necessarily what we're getting.
Yeah.
But what we are getting isn't necessarily, I think, all that bad. Like, I once you watch Andor, you think of like man, I wish this kind of dialogue, this kind of monologue, this type of intrigue would kind of carry over. And I'm starting to realize that I think that was just an anomaly. I think Andor was just an anomaly, and so wanting kind of and then the show is a lot shorter too. I think it's like 4 episodes shorter than what Andor was. I think Andor had a full 12 episodes. I'm trying to think, but then they were all each an hour long, I believe. So it was way more time for characterization and stuff like that. Great writing also, but I'm also getting stuff that I didn't get in Andor, and that's kind of lightheartedness. I love the lightheartedness of Star Wars, and when I say lightheartedness, I mean like stuff like Basil. I think of shirtless Yord ironing his robes, like
sure.
You know what I mean? Like there's like the little lighter stuff that kind of I think of A New Hope and stuff, and like those older movies where like there is like some kind of comedic relief in there. And Andor's just very serious, very very tense all the way through, right? And what I'm getting out of the Acolyte is not as intense. We have phenomenal action, and I'm not just talking about 4 and 5, but like also in 1 and 2 we had some the good stuff with May in the middle of the street with Soul and doing the acrobatics and all that, and of course the fight with Indara in episode 1. Like this is scratching the kind of like the action-y part of Star Wars, which I kind of not gave up on, at least not exactly, but I just didn't think we would really see outside of like a feature-length film. So This is kind of scratching something I didn't realize I had an itch for per se, but it's kind of okay. It's like if you went to a really nice, you thought you were going to a 5-star restaurant, Abram, and you're like, I want to get some steak, I want to get some lobster. And instead you get like a big old, you're like, oh, it's not a 5-star restaurant, but there's a big thing of chili cheese fries.
Yeah.
And you know what? Sometimes I'm in the mood for something more garbagey like chili cheese fries. You get what I'm saying? So this is kind of, it's not what I wanted, but I'm not mad at it either.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. I think that on a larger than Star Wars level, I think the show fails pretty consistently across metrics of writing, of pacing, of plot, of acting.
Even the lighting, just how everything looks is kind of weird too, I think.
I think that they are unable to marry the on location photography with the
Yeah.
CGI elements. I think that they're not doing a good job about that. I agree with you.
Especially like the forest area. The whole forest area just feels weird. I don't know how to put it. I can't put my finger on it. But if it feel I don't think it's the volume, but it feels like the volume. I don't know. It just feels it's clearly not a fort. You know what I mean? Like it just feels like here's some stage dressing and like it's like a very high production play. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we said earlier in the review in the last portion, which is when you're not in the volume and there are real things and fake things, it's harder to blend the fake things into the real things than if everything is fake. So I think through those lenses, the show just doesn't really work. But that's not the reason you or I are watching ultimately. And so I do enjoy what you're laying out in terms of the action, and I do just enjoy seeing a totally different cast of characters and a totally different set of planets. Even if they are, of course, evocative of other corners of the galaxy, they are new, and I enjoy being here. And I have to say, again, I love The Stranger so much that it has ratcheted my interest up to make sure that I catch episode 6 right away. Because if I hadn't gotten spoiled, if I hadn't felt sort of apathy and waited and banked episodes 4 and 5, I wouldn't have gotten spoiled on anything from The Stranger, but everyone loved him so much he was on Twitter as soon as the episode aired. So
you knew for sure who he was before even going to okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll tune in tomorrow night as of when we're recording this for episode 6 right away. And we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. I how hard time putting a number on something, especially when the show is not even done yet. Right. But I wouldn't score this particularly high, and I think that if the show continues at this current quality, I sadly think the Acolyte's going to land lower down my list of Disney Plus Star Wars shows than I anticipated it was going to. But we'll see. You got to take the good with the bad with this one, because the good is really, 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 really good. So we'll be back one more time, Andrew, to talk about how all of this somehow wraps up. There's no shortage of different threads to pull on, so we'll see how they balance that. But is there anything else?
I see what you did there.
Anything else about these episodes you wanted to touch on, or you think we're good for now?
I feel coming out of this, no matter how it turns out, how the show ends, I feel they've just with The Stranger, they've kind of created another like Darth Revan iconic kind of depiction of another Force or Sith Lord, or we want to call it. I'm not sure if he really is a Sith. I think he's saying he's Sith, but we'll find out, I guess. But yeah, have you heard the on Twitter, like, or not rumors, but kind of opinions that people think like this is kind of like a Knights of Ren origin story?
That's interesting. Mostly because interesting.
Of that. Yeah. Mostly because of the helmet design. People think that it could be like a offshoot, or like, because an Acolyte, it kind of has it sounds like more like a cult kind of thing than an official like religion kind of thing. So there's like kind of that implication, or at least there's room where this could be like a kind of a false like a misdirect kind of thing, that maybe it's not the mainline direct line Sith. And there's also some people who are theorizing that probably that the Stranger or Khmer is going to be stomped by like the real Sith at the end of the show or something like that. Kind of like for pretending or faking or calling them attention to them or something like that. Someone thinks that I've seen some kind of ideas that might be some theories about that. So curious to see. But I mean, have you seen also Hasbro has like the helmet on pre-order now, like the actual?
Oh yeah,
that's so cool. Like I'm like I would get that, but I don't have that kind of money to just be tossing around on stuff like that.
I will, but I rarely buy them, but I will buy the Black Series figure for him when that inevitably becomes available.
Yeah.
And if we lived in a just world, there would be a Star Wars game for him, but that's not going to happen.
Dude, that'd be awesome. You could like switch between like hand-to-hand combat and like lightsaber action for like oh, like you can't take out this guy, he's got like shields, you got to switch to hand-to-hand combat or something like that. That'd be pretty cool. But also I'm looking forward to, because there's 2 more things that I've seen in trailers that we haven't seen yet in the show, and that's that weird, or whatever it is, that asteroid belt or planetary ring thing with the ship. Like there's gonna be some kind of like, I imagine some kind of ship combat or something going on. And of course, we still haven't seen the lightsaber whip, which is clearly shown to be like on that planet that we just saw, that foresty
Yeah.
planet. So curious to see. Maybe tomorrow I'll see those things.
Maybe tomorrow. Yeah. But Andrew, we don't have to ask anybody to wait. Hold on. We don't have to have you tell anybody to make sure that the Force is with them, because we'll be back in real time in a couple weeks, but in video time right now to talk about the rest of the Acolyte. And we're back through hyperspace, Andrew. We're back once again for the last part of our big major Acolyte. I think of this almost like a time capsule review. I like this format we've been doing because it kind of allows the viewer to get this one big chunk of Acolyte discussion, but also see like in real time how we were feeling about the episodes. Mm-hmm. And we're back to do that for the last set. We're back to talk about episodes 6, 7, and 8. A lot happened, but also maybe not as much as we might have been hoping. I think that this is a really intriguing set of episodes to end out the show on, Andrew. Obviously, we ended on a high last time, episode 5. I think probably universally considered the best episode of the show. I would tend to agree, but 8 is really good too, as we'll get to. But then we find ourselves in a strange place for 6. And then we sort of stay in this strange mode of storytelling through the end of the show. What did you think of this sort of last leg of the Acolyte?
I remember the last time we recorded, I was a little more optimistic about I was like, well, maybe things will get better, or maybe I was like, I don't think the dialogue and the acting is gonna magically get better, and of course that didn't happen. But yeah. I thought maybe the story, like okay, like hold on, like maybe I don't know what we're driving towards, but maybe it's gonna be like a big payoff. And in some ways, it kind of was. In a lot of ways, more ways, it kind of just petered out, and it was kind of like the whole. I found it very frustrating how a lot of the characters, Master, I can't remember her name, Vernestra, and Soul, and constantly just missing each other, like like traveling from place to place. We spent so much time traveling, and then we get to places, and then nothing really happens. It's just pointless investigating. A lot of thoughts formed in the head that the audience are not privy to, and it kind of just feels like they're like leading us to something, and then it kind of just ends with like a kind of like a cliffhanger, kind of like I don't know, like maybe they kind of just lost their train of thought as they got towards the end. But like, yeah, I just man, I at least, again, like I've been saying for the last few episodes, at least no one can say that the action isn't great, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I was talking to Tanner about these episodes, and he sort of said, here's what you do. Acolyte's done, working on new Star Wars projects. You look at the crew, you figure out who choreographed the action sequences, you pick them up, you put them in a new project, and you kind of call that good, because that is the best part of the Acolyte for sure. And after we kind of talk over these episodes, we'll zoom out and we'll have a larger conversation and bring in the community's thoughts about the show as a whole. But I think that the last 3 episodes of the show are just bad, sadly. I think that the Acolyte really did not stick the landing for me, and that's a bummer. I think the word I would use to describe the end of the show, and it does apply to the show on the whole, but I would describe the show as convoluted. Yeah. And I would describe it as I'm not even going to say oddly paced. I think I'm not going to say poorly paced. I'm going to say oddly paced. And I think that episode 7 is a big indication of that. Because we sort of in a lot of ways, we kind of redo episode 3. We even reuse footage from it. And I found that to be a really odd way of storytelling, especially because we kind of stall out in episode 6. You know, we go from this really consequential moment to this strange sort of, again, as I described it in the last part, this coconut shell game of swapping Osha and May. And I don't really think we don't get that much out of episode 6. Now, I have to say that I do like Kamir and Osha, their relationship. By the way, just whenever you put a Force user on a nice secluded island with some pretty geography and some funny little creatures, I'm happy. It's very octo coded. That was the name of Luke's island, right? Or am I
Octo,
forgetting?
yeah,
Yeah.
ACHTO, yeah.
So I found their relationship somewhat compelling. I didn't really find what was going on with May and Soul that compelling at all. I actually found it quite astoundingly written. Um, but let's talk first about that relationship between Osha and Kamir. What did you make of sort of how they're like intellectually sparring on this island?
I like the and I feel like I've seen this in other media as well, but kind of how she wakes up and she's just kind of allowed free reign to kind of just move about. Kimir, like, he's not really seeing her as like a major threat. He's actually very physically vulnerable to her because he basically has trust that she's not going to do anything, like, he knows the whole like the mantra. Even though she's not a Jedi anymore, he knows like he's not going to be harmed because he's not presenting himself as like a threat at that moment. He goes into like a little bath. Twitter, X, social media in general went all crazy all over that, saying that shot,
Yep.
some of those shots should have lingered a little bit longer, so, which I thought was really funny. But she just kind of like picks up his lightsaber, or was it his lightsaber? No, yeah, it was his lightsaber,
Yep.
right? I think, and he kind of just like kind of threatens, or not threatens her, but kind of like edges her on, like go ahead, like like you can't, like, oh, and I think he makes fun of her, or jokes about something about like, oh, you're really gonna like harm me like while I'm vulnerable with my back turned, kind of thing. And so he kind of starts to disarm her, not just literally, but like metaphorically too, kind of like he's trying to come off as someone who's not really a threat to her because he has bigger like fish to fry, so to speak. And so she kind of has this free range, lets her guard down. They kind of get more. He officially refers. I think he calls it cortosis, like the helmet he has and
Yeah.
everything. And he's just kind of playing like a like reverse Yoda, a little like aloof, kind of just like you're stuck here, and like, oh, you can leave if you want, but I would wait until like the tide goes down or whatever. Like there's only one ship, and kind of like that false reign of freedom in a way where like you can go, but like it's gonna be rough going if you leave or whatever. And so I kind of like that. I think that was the best part of that episode, was just that whole kind of peeling back of Kimir as he's kind of, it's like, oh yeah, like, like try the helmet on, like he's like, it's not like it's like sensory deprivation is really what the helmet is for him, and it allows him to like focus and hold and like not be so distracted, which was, I thought was really interesting. And kind of I mean, it's just tradition for like Sith to have like helmets and identities and stuff like that. So or masks and whatnot. So I thought it was pretty neat. But I also really liked how they kind of like, there's no porgs, right? But
Yeah.
but could this be the same planet? It doesn't have a name, but there's things that are porg like, right? Those
True.
little like rat elephant looking things. I forgot the names. They're like really cute and adorable. But I'm like, this could easily just be like another hemisphere on the same planet, kind of thing, right? Like there's like they're playing cute with not giving you the name. And like,
Yes.
and in Star Wars lore, like Acto has like another name to like Sith, like it has a different name to like dark side users, and like they're playing very coy with it, like not giving you the name. And it's like you kind of just have to assume there's only so many planets that have similar topography and geology and all that. So but yeah, episode 6, definitely a lot slower after what came before it, but I kind of liked how you
Yes.
kind of just get to just breathe for a moment after 5.
Yeah, I agree with you on the whole there. I think because their relationship is so interesting, I actually didn't really mind just sort of watching them communicate together, like on this little closed location, seeing the ways that Kamir is sort of taunting her, and forcing her to sort of interrogate her past relationships with the Jedi. I thought that was a pretty interesting moment as she's sort of
Mm.
lashing out at Kamir for killing Yord, for killing Jecki, and he's sort of pushing back. And it's sort of counterintuitive, as an audience member to be like, yeah, maybe they did kind of suck. But I think that it's a combination of great persuasion on the behalf of Kamir, and I think a very good performance. Maybe my favorite performance in the entire show. But I also
Mhm.
think it is sadly sort of a symptom of the fact that we don't really care about Yord or Jackie as audience members. They're not really built up that much, but they end up serving as good like verbal sparring pieces, I guess. So I like that. I do like putting on the Cortosis helmet. That's sort of a nice bit of filmmaking, seeing through its eyes or lack thereof, and
The
having
breathing.
the breathing is great. I thought that was really actually quite strong on the whole. I didn't have too much of an issue with that plot line. I actually think it was quite enjoyable. What do you make though of the stuff between May pretending to be Osha and Soul? Because I found it a little bit strange exactly who held the power in that scene. Because we're thinking that Soul is very adept in the Force, right? There's
Right.
actually an
Mhm.
exchange between Osha and Kamir where Osha's like, he's gonna find, Soul is so adept in the Force, he's gonna find me, he's gonna find where he took me. And Kamir challenges that and says, actually, it's not that he's strong in the Force, it's that you are, and you're very
Mhm.
visible in the Force. And I found that to be sort of an interesting half explanation for what was going on with Soul, but it doesn't, I feel, really hold up to scrutiny, because then shouldn't May be strong in the Force? And I guess the idea, and we'll get into the whole fucking virgins one person thing in a little bit, but I don't know. I just don't. I couldn't really intuit if Soul was playing her for a fool on the ship, or if it really was Basil like hopping around saying, "Hey, that's May. You gotta get her." Because that's how it literally reads. He after
Yeah.
he stuns her, Basil's like in the background, all hyped up about it. Um, but I just found their whole thing perplexing. What did you think of them?
I felt like he did know, and he just kind of didn't let on that he knew.
Sure.
I feel like when she's approaching him in the cockpit, she's ready to blast him, and he kind of just like, "Hey, can you take the controls real quick? Like, I gotta do this thing or whatever." Like, and then like whenever he like brushes up against her, it's like a awkward moment. Like when he passes by, like kind of like it's it feels like it's not like a natural movement when he goes by her. Like twice, I think it happens where he kind of like he's gonna play it casual, but he feels like something might happen, and then nothing happens,
That's
and
fair.
he proceeds to go on his way. Um, but yeah, like I felt I never for a moment thought he didn't know the difference, because like I imagine, for example, I imagine if Osha does have, I'm sure, yeah, she has a presence in the Force that
Yeah.
even May could mask her own, but even masking it would be different from having it, right? So like, or some kind of like
Yeah.
was it I forget the term, but it's like a absence of evidence is an evidence of absence kind of thing. Like she, even if she was different in the Force, not having the exact same signature, I think he might have caught on and just kind of feigned ignorance just to like get her vulnerable, or get her maybe to come out of her own shell, or try to show him maybe that he's not so bad or whatever, and just kind of like disarm her like in a different way. So I think it wasn't until I'm trying to remember the moment when he finally does like lock her up, where he finally gets like the shackles in her on the little like flat bed whatever thing.
Yeah.
That's like when he finally kind of drops the shroud.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think you're right. Ultimately, I think it's just sort of oddly put together, because then I think about the time um, when she is gonna kill Soul and she pulls out her dagger,
Mm-hmm.
and then puts it back away quickly when he turns around. Maybe it's intentionally filmed as though it's a little bit unclear who holds the knowledge, but I just think as an audience member it ends up feeling a little bit muddled. And we don't progress their relationship really at all. It's actually all episode 7 is basically, we finally we have May strapped to the table, and then it's time for Soul to give his big confession.
Right.
Now, I do think it was smart to not have the confession just be like a spoken soliloquy. I think that would have probably not read the best to the audience. I think it would have been sort of boring. I feel like they went from one poor extreme to the other poor extreme, as we'll talk about in episode 7. But sort of the last thing to touch on in 6 really is this reintroduction of the Jedi Order as like a political body that has
Mm-hmm.
a vested interest in what's happening here. We get what's her name? Green lady's name? I keep forgetting.
Vernestra.
Yeah, Venestra. She's a very peculiar character to me because she's treated with such importance, but we spend so little time with her that I don't really feel it ever. But we come to learn who I assume is like her sniveling Padawan, who's like running errands for her.
Mog,
yeah, Mog.
Mm-hmm.
And we start to get this sort of, plan in place, this assumption as to what happened, this urgency from Venestra to go out and chase them down. And we get that kind of, but as you were saying, it's this bait and switch. It's this coconut shell. It's, Soul radios in, Soul leaves. They arrive right away. They go to the planet. They find evidence. Mog thinks one thing. Venestra thinks another. Venestra uses her saber whip for literally 2 seconds. And then it disappears, which is a whole nother can of worms. But I didn't find that plot element particularly compelling, and I didn't really until the very, very end of the show with the overall cover-up, which we'll talk about. But did you sort of think any particular way about the Jedi Order here at the end?
Yeah, I mean, going back to when we first got kind of like the synopsis of what the show was going to be before we even heard like casting or whatever, the story was always supposed to be about they referred to it as this like dark acolyte, and then it was supposed to be the preceding steps to the downfall of the Jedi. So going into the show, I always knew there was going to be something, and I mean, she says the term twice, but it's something to tip the scales is what she says, right? And then ironically enough, it's kind of like they're kind of doing it to themselves in a way with the whole trying to police themselves, or I don't know, who's gonna Jedi the Jedi, or police the police kind of thing, right? And
Yes.
they're kind of like, hey, should we tell the council these things? We're like, no, let's keep this on the inside for now. It's like, maybe we should tell them that this thing that occurred a couple years has kind of reared its ugly head back around, and there's some information we didn't know about or we didn't release at the time that maybe we should now. And just kind of like let's do some damage control. We don't want to let the Senate's like very nosy these days. We don't want them to know what's going on. And like, I mean, right off the bat, like when you have to like hide, cover your steps and things get messy, and something that I was always told as a kid is that lies beget more lies as you try to cover up the lie, and kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that we kind of see that unfold here, where they're trying to kind of find a scapegoat or eventually pass off the blame off to somebody else, kind of thing. And I don't remember if it's episode 7 or 8 where the politician we finally meet comes in and talks about like because we're as audience members growing up with these movies, like it's always been like, and I don't want to say the word propaganda, but we've always seen the Jedi from a certain point of view.
Yeah,
certain point of view of things, right? And then you have to imagine from a outside point or a third party or even just a non-Sith point that like the Jedi are given so much leeway in how they operate, how they're sent on missions across the galaxy, do whatever they want, lightsabers, diplomacy, the Force, something people don't understand really that well. Like they kind of just get told about it and stuff, and it's like you have this unchecked organization who's kind of just calling the shots and playing it by ear. And so you have to imagine like you want to rein that in, and you want some kind of like oversight. And we kind of see that Vernestra is like very defensive about this whole thing. And you kind of start to see the little cracks in the armor and the way how the Jedi are kind of shown to the public, how they behave. And so having to kind of like, well, we can't let them know about this rogue Jedi because that's going to hurt our public image. And it's like, well, they're going to start wanting to put more control or more oversight of the Jedi, like non-Jedi oversight on the council. And it's like, okay, we got to keep this internal. But that's already stinks of like corruption when you have to like, do that kind of stuff, So I kind of just, me, I always like the politics of Star Wars. I find it very interesting. This is like the first time we've seen it just Senate, Empire stuff. Is more kind of on the internal runnings of the Jedi Order. And I kind of like how they're kind of seeing they even though this is still like the trail end of the High Republic, we kind of start to see the descent into the regular Republic that we know of from the prequels. And of course we get that shot at the very end. We're not there yet. We get that very shot there at the end of kind of little connective tissue of all that. And so, yeah, I like that. I find it very interesting. I like how she kind of has she interrogates I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but she interrogates May, and then kind of she's like, okay, so this is the story we're going to kind of weave together of what really happened.
Yeah.
And she's kind of playing the whole diplomat kind of thing, and I'm like, oh, okay, like, yeah, this is probably going to come back and bite us in the ass later on, but all right. So
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that later in our larger discussion, because our friend Steven shared some really interesting thoughts about that component of the show. But that actually dovetails nicely into episode 7, which is where we find out what really happened. This is a really weird episode to me, because I think it's compelling on its own terms. I like a lot of things here. I like this character of Torben, this really impatient Padawan. It's very, very Anakin coded, right? I mean, I like that. I like seeing him huff around and want to go home, and the way he becomes exploited by the coven of something. I don't remember their actual name, but the force sensitive women there who have their little cult, as the Jedi call them. I like that character note a lot. I like the fight against Kelnaka. I think that's interesting.
mm-hmm.
The general sort of recontextualization of episode 3, though, to me doesn't really work, because I think it was always obvious that what happened in episode 3 was not what actually happened.
Yeah.
And so to see it unfold as it did is maybe interesting, but it's a more meta criticism of the show, because we have so few episodes. We have only 8 episodes, and a lot of them are not even really pushing 40 minutes in length. So it's a fairly short show on the whole. And so I think I was thinking we'd spend maybe 10, maybe 12, 15 minutes on this flashback, and then return to the ship with May and Sol. But we don't. We spend pretty much the whole episode with them. And I just don't think that that's an efficient use of screen time. And I think that this concept of divergence is thrown in so late that it doesn't really mean a whole hell of a lot. I think that it's confusing. This is where the convolution comes in. Mm-hmm. I think that the relationship between Osha and May and their mothers and the Force and everything is too complicated. It doesn't need to be this way. I think we get so much thrown at us in episode 7 through this very odd framing that, to me, it just on the whole, it didn't work, even though there's a lot of ideas in there that I really like about the Force mind possession, and the action is really good, and I like being on Kofar. I think it's a cool planet, seeing more Carrie-Anne Moss, seeing the Jedi want to act but be sort of put down by the council and pushing back against that. There's good stuff in there, but I just don't think that the whole, the sum of the parts is that effective.
Yeah, I a lot of stuff's not real. It's a lot of miscommunication, which makes it very frustrating.
Yeah.
Where a lot of things are kind of telegraphed or not fully explained. The whole that when the mother, she kind of like dissolves into this black smoke fog mist thing, and I'm like thinking like, well, she's intangible at this point, right? And then somehow Soul is able to stab Smoke, and I was like, I don't know what's going on here. And then the whole like, oh, I was gonna let her go. I'm like, well, it really didn't look like it. It didn't look like that's what you were doing. It looked like the opposite. And just it's very, I get frustrated in a lot of media where it's things could easily be solved. People just communicated like efficiently. And that episode is an example of like where it's just kind of a lot like, well, if maybe we just wait a few more seconds, or maybe we just wait, let them explain, or like, and it just feels, I don't know. It's frustrating. And then the whole thing with I forgot her name, but you said Carrie-Anne Moss, she does a thing where she like pushes the witches' minds out of Kelnaka, and somehow they just, I don't know if that kills them or knocks them out.
Seemingly kills them, because in episode 3 we see like that shot from above of them all just like laid out dead.
Right. And so I'm like, she probably didn't know that, freeing him was going to somehow sever this. I mean, she meant to sever the connection, but it's like, did she just kill all those witches? Are they that easy to kill? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of just like, I think back to the whole thing where we almost had that with like with the second episode, right? Do you remember when Osha walks in and she finds Torben dead, like alone separately, right? And it's very circumstantial when everybody else arrives, and it's like, really, like, are they really gonna do this? And then of course Yor shows up. He's like, actually no, like she like, oh okay, we get that answer very quick. Here is kind of like oh, it's implied that that the Jedi, savagely just raised and killed all these women, when it's like, that's not how it played out. But it really doesn't matter how it plays out, because we never come back to that. That's never addressed. Where do those women go? Are they dead? Did they just get knocked out and they left after the Jedi left the planet? Like, we don't know. And it's just it just feels very muddled, and it's just very unsatisfying. Like, I remember watching that episode thinking like, well, we got answers, but they weren't satisfying answers. And just the way that whole plays out, you're right. I thought the Kelnaka's fight was cool, just because we never seen like a Wookiee with a lightsaber is just terrifying. Just the amount of weight he puts behind the blade, and you can see that as they all like kind of like Torben and Soul kind of stagger behind the hits. I thought that was kind of actually really, really cool. But again, it's the trade-off of like you want really good action, like, well, we're gonna have to suffer in a different department if you want that kind of thing. That's what this whole show has been, just a trade-off of things. And I just, that whole, like you said, like that whole episode felt like way too long, with just using kind of retreaded footage and stuff. Like, they could have just been like, well, so it could have just been like May saying like, well, I remember this happened, and Soul's like, actually, and then just focus like 1 minute clips, like a 1 minute, like, this is what we saw from our point of view. And then May, counters or says something else, and he's like, well, and then, from his point of view, but not the entire length of the story, but just the little the little things that like are different from her angle, not the whole like the fire again and the forest scene, finding them in the forest next to that yellow tree. Like, we didn't need all that stuff. We saw that. So we saw you in the original one. So you were creeping around the tree. We saw you. You don't need to see you now from the behind you. Kind of, you know what I mean? Like, it's like unnecessary. Yeah. So I do agree that a lot of, and I kind of have to wonder too, because we haven't got to there yet, but Steven kind of says like, or Steven or Phil, I forgot who, but someone said like, where else would you fit this episode in? Yeah. And I think you really can't really put it anywhere else, but I just feel maybe, I don't know, if it was put in like halfway through, just because we keep getting that thing with Soul throughout the show where he's like, let me explain, like, he's like, I'll explain everything once we get back to the ship. And it's like, I don't know, it's very frustrating. Like, I know you have to like balance storytelling with like giving the audience enough information to kind of keep them on the hook. But at the same time, I think like, if we were to use the fishing metaphor, sometimes fish just give up and they just let go. You know what I mean? So I kind of felt that too, where I was like, I don't know if I really care about the reason or the explanation anymore, because the time to tell me would have been like 2 episodes ago or something. It's just, episode 7 just feels like in an awkward place. I would probably cut that up a little bit, maybe dispersed it little by little throughout the show. Maybe
that would be my suggestion. I mean, ultimately, episode 3 is an abridged version of episode 7 on like just a literal level.
Yeah,
just don't do episode 3. Just pick scenes out that are important through flashbacks. Osha and May see things in the forest, or they're asleep and they see visions, or something's mentioned, we see a moment, and then you get the whole thing in episode 7. I mean, I think that's a sensible way to do it, but I just think a lot of things have been better than this. I think you're totally right about just not caring about the answer, because I think that the broad stroke answer is obvious, and it was for the whole show. The Jedi screwed up and they led to people dying there, and they probably caused a fire, or they didn't stop it or something. The general sentiment of what happened, I think, has been clear for the entirety of the show. So I think when you belabor it to this extent and you bring in so many concepts, it becomes very overwhelming. And I don't mind sort of inexplicable things or unprecedented things happening in Star Wars. It's never really been an issue for me. Like Leia flying, and when we talk about The Last Jedi, we'll get to it, but it's never bothered me, because like, okay, no one's flown Star Wars before, someone's flying.
It just looks weird, Aaron. It just looks funny.
It does look funny, but like, I'm just like, sure, why not? So bring in the Virgins, 2 created as 1, whatever. Like, the problem isn't inherently the idea. The problem is the execution of the idea. They just do too much. Episode 7 is both dangerously close to being a filler episode in an 8-episode show, and so hyper important that it's a weird like bashing of heads. I think it's very oddly Um, very oddly put together, and it speaks to my central issue, which we'll get to more in depth. But that is just simply the Osha and May storyline. I think just makes the show worse. I just think that it's confusing, and it doesn't need to be, especially because the show ends. And let's start talking about the finale. The show ends with May being ostensibly useless and Osha taking May's position.
She just gets discarded. Yeah.
So I understand that there's an important sibling relationship. And I understand that Soul had to choose one of them to save. I actually like that moment in episode 7 because it's this sort of, and again, it's this stupid mistake that he makes. He could have grabbed them, not the bridge, but he grabs the bridge because he's inexperienced. He's not thinking right. So to me, that's not a plot hole. It's more of like, it's an indication where Soul's at. He's erratic. He killed their mother already because he made a bad decision. He made another bad decision here. So I get that. And I like it actually. But by the time we get to the finale and the possessions of the sisters are swapped and one is completely irrelevant to the future of the narrative now because she doesn't remember anything since she was 8. I'm like, well, this was an inelegant way to get here, and it's an unsatisfying conclusion. But let's rewind a little bit. Let's talk about the showdown on Brendok. Because, again, it's another very action-heavy episode. And, Andrew, just talk to me about that, the fight scene between Khmer and Soul.
Man. That I think in some ways, I think that kind of tops the fight in episode 5, honestly. Even though there's more lightsabers, more action in 5, I like how there's little echoes here and there of, I think, Revenge of the Sith and a little bit also of Phantom Menace. But like when they're going down the hall and they're tracing, the lightsabers are like tracing like spiral cut into the wall. Very, very Revenge of the Sith. Like I thought of like, Anakin and Obi-Wan leaving sparks flying in a little closed space. Like so cool. And then we finally get him, like they do like that cool, awkward. I think it's cool, but like kind of awkward wushu kind of going down to the lower level, where Soul's kind of leaning back and Khmer is like leaning forward and he does like the little quick step to dodge out of the way. The dude when he does the like that force wave thing where the lightsabers come back around, and I guess Khmer's going in for a punch. It looks like he's kind of coming in with like an aerial punch kind of thing. I'm just thinking like what's gonna happen here? But then he kind of does like this like force wave thing, just sends everything flying back. Like I liked how we've seen consistently throughout the show that like Soul can take on Khmer. Like there's by the end of the finale, there's 2 instances where he clearly could have killed him and chose not to, and we kind of get I just love the back and forth. The way I sent the GIF earlier where Khmer like approaches, he does a thing, pops up the other one with a shorter kind of like reminds me of like how samurai have like 2 blades, guys, like the little Tano thing or whatever. And just the speed at which they fight. Like I remember I saw someone put a GIF and I was like, is this sped up? And I went back to watch the show like, oh no, like they're fighting at that speed. It's not sped up. They're just incredibly quick. And like you see just how skilled Soul is with the lightsaber and just how Khmer's just coming at him. They're doing that awkward, like the bending behind the back kind of thing and going for like a lot of moments where you think like, oh, he's not going to be able to dodge it. Oh, he is able to dodge it or like deflect it at the last second. Like very like incredible like fight career. The kind of stuff that like I watched this and I'm like, this feels like the perfect blend of the sequel lightsaber fighting, but also the prequel. Like it's not as ballerina like the prequel is with like wasted movements. You know what I mean? Like it's not so much wasted kind of flowering, like almost like that light, like that, like the lightsabers are like weightless kind of. There's more weight here, but it's also much faster than the sequel trilogy, where like the sequel is like very brutal, very up close, very heavy. This is like the perfect marriage of prequel and sequel like lightsaber choreography, and I just love it. And even dude, again, not even when they're using lightsabers, but even just the hand-to-hand stuff when there is no reason, when there's no lightsabers at all, just the hand-to-hand stuff, like it just takes it to another level. And it's like, man, like what you said earlier, they really should just keep that whole unit or department in charge of that and just find a way to incorporate that into some future project or something, because dude, it's just it's phenomenal. I loved it. I thought that's like the best part of the show is the combat. So
it's just outstanding. I mean, I really think that it's For my money, it's the best choreography in Star Wars ever. I mean, I just think that, and our friend Sam said this the other day. It's so obvious to do wuxia style combat in the Star Wars universe. It's so obvious. It almost feels too easy, but nobody did it for so long. But it's such a brilliant idea. Because I hate to say this, but I'm just going to be honest here. If you don't like these action sequences, you just have no taste. And there are people on Twitter who are like, "Oh my god, I can't believe they're doing this fucking crouching tiger, hidden dragon." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? It's awesome!" And people who can manipulate the Force is like the most sensible application for wuxia style action sequences.
The slowing down, the bending the physics a little bit, like agreed.
It's phenomenal. It's really phenomenal stuff. I even like when Osha and May are fighting. I think that's really cool too. When they're fighting.
Oh, I forgot about that. You're right. Yeah.
In the bedroom, I think it's a little bit less good because obviously there's more sort of CGI that's here to get to get the same face on each. So we're cutting in kind of peculiar ways.
Those wide shots where you see both their faces, you can clearly see it's not like them actually. Yeah.
It's not.
Oh, well, her, right? It'd be her, the one. Yeah. Some of the shots where they show her when they're fighting in the room. Oh, I think that's a guy. I can see a guy's face like superimposed or something, or like, you know what I mean?
It's not great. I do like. This is where the 2 as 1 idea is cool because they're like blocking each other's strikes in exactly the same way, and we cut to a wide, and if you look past the bad CGI work, they're like stanced up in the same way, blocking each other. Like that's cool stuff. I think all the action in this episode was really, really good, and I do feel personally like it tops 5. I really like seeing Kumir just kill many Jedi. I think that's neat. Just mowing through them. But in terms of the raw choreography, to me, it's just unmatched. I thought it was just incredible. I really loved it.
Mm-hmm. Also, before I would be remiss if we skipped the saber because we could easily just skip it because it's not that important. But we finally got that space scene in the asteroid belt looking thing of the planetary ring, which was like one of the scenes I was looking forward to since like first or whatever trailer that showed up, and I was like, when are we gonna see that? Then we finally get that where he's chasing where Soul's chasing May through like that little like. I like how we fly into like it's not an asteroid, but it's like a rocky ring for like this planet, and like this clearly divided like field of rocks in between, and it looks so bad like seeing them fly because I don't think that would have been possible back during even the prequel times. Like we kind of get that when Obi-Wan's chasing what's his name, Jango Fett through the asteroid belt.
Yeah,
it kind of reminded me of that again of just like. They're not even really weaving because I guess the rocks are so tiny that's not even like a threat. No one's really trying to dodge the rocks because they're just like whatever. But that whole scene where he gets like when he finally gets hit and like he gets shot and like it like spirals outward and you see like the rocks flying in every direction and come in and out of the ring. Oh, so good. I love the space chases, the space chase scenes in Star Wars in general. So like we got another good one in the books right there.
We did. And I also just really like the High Republic ship design. I think it's really cool. And I like that this ship has sort of that the ghost design about it where you can break a smaller ship out of it.
The ship within a ship, yeah.
Yeah. And like I'm pretty sure technically the Millennium Falcon can do that, but they never do. Because like you can't have the Millennium Falcon get destroyed or like separated or whatever because it's cool.
They lose it, remember? In Solo. It's like
do they?
That black hole thing, that black hole monster thing.
Oh,
like they eject that thing.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, they eject it, so that's why the Falcon never has the little thing, the little ship at the end or whatever.
That's a great point. I forgot about that. But I like this a lot. I think it's a great ship design. I was a little bit confused. Didn't Basil like rip some cords out of the wall at one point?
I don't understand what that was. I've seen so many Twitter like threads trying to explain what he was doing, where like, oh, if you see it from Basil's point of view, he doesn't understand why Soul is like trying to shoot her down or something. I'm like, maybe,
but he does because he knows that that's May.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm like, it's weird when you have a character who has no dialogue, like not even like a droid that chirps or beats.
Yeah,
and like the only person who understands him is dead. It's like, it's weird, right? Like he's like, and like Soul's kind of like flustered, but he's not. He's like angry, but at the same time, he doesn't care enough to like tell him anything because he knows like he can't. This thing's
I thought
just
he sabotaged him.
Yeah, he did like. Sabotage him, but but I don't know. He's a weird little guy.
He is a weird little
He
guy.
has his own agenda that's like not even like anyone really knows about. He's just there like I don't know. He's like a modifier like in a D&D story. It's like, okay, you have this little thing that's going to be hindering you every now and then just randomly.
True. But then he shows back up and he helps be a tracker again. He's just around. So shout out to Basil, who makes it out unscathed, it seems. But what do you think about the saber bleeding? I think it's cool.
The what?
The kyber crystal bleeding.
Oh, yeah. That was actually really cool. I thought that was kind of neat. I like how when she finally has a blade, like the crystal's like exposed, like it's sticking out the side of the handle. So her hand is resting on the kyber crystal, and you kind of see that. I thought that was cool. I never seen like the fluctuating between the blue and the red on the blade at the same time. I thought like that is really visually, that's just an interesting storytelling too, because we see the moment of like where her emotions, first of all, I felt so stupid thinking of like how like the whole show about killing a Jedi without a weapon, and it's so obvious. Abram was right there, the force choke. And I'm like, why did I never think of that? And I feel so stupid that like, I guess because in my mind I always just associate that move with Vader. Vader's really the only person in at least in the live action Star Wars media we ever really see. I don't think Palpatine even does it. I don't think
only other person does it is Luke on the Gamorrean guard.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, but that was more of just kind of get him out of the way. He wasn't really trying to kill them, I guess. You know what I mean? He was that was more just like to back off or whatever. Like, yeah, but yeah. So like, it was right there in front of him. She does the thing, but she has like the fluctuate. The crystal's exposed, and it's like you can see it going back. It's going back and forth between like bluish and reddish, and like, Kamir's like trying to like console her, and then she like swings it at him, backs away, and then the changing. Then when it finally just stays red, and I was like, that's dope. That's cool. I like how it just finally settles on red, and like, oh, like there you go. Like it's like, I mean, you're better at this kind of stuff, talking about different types of storytelling, but like it's one of those things where like words are not necessary. Like the visuals do all the speaking for that moment, and I'm like, and then having seen it in Cal Kestis, Jedi Survivor too, right? When we see forget his name, it starts with a D, but the is it Dagan? I forgot his name, but he does the same thing, right? He takes apart his lightsaber, has a yellow crystal, bleeds it, puts it back together. I was like, oh, okay, like there we go. We finally got that in live action. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things. As far as bad as like the story and the dialogue and all that stuff, like clearly the people, Leslie, she's clearly a very big fan of the greater overall Star Wars lore in general, and just seeing that like that moment, the cortosis like being being a thing that's now like part of again of like canon, and the crystal bleeding, like all these little things, while they don't make up for the overall confusion of the show, they are really nice visual touches that I appreciate.
They are. I mean, and I fucking hate the people on Twitter who are like, oh well, if she can bleed her saber, why didn't Anakin bleed his when he was?
Well, that wasn't a thing in 2005.
That's my whole point. It didn't exist yet. George Lucas didn't think of it.
But also, she was touching the crystal. Anakin wasn't. There you go. That's the in-universe answer.
Yeah. And the in-universe answer, I think, is more than sufficient. But like the me just as a person answer is like, don't you want, if there's a cool new idea for Star Wars, don't you want them to just do it? Like, do you really like? Are you gonna enjoy Revenge of the Sith less now that he didn't bleed his kyber crystal? I just like it. It's hard for me to get in that mindset because I'm just like, yeah, it's fucking awesome. It's good storytelling.
The one addendum to that, Abram, and I know we're gonna get to it. Who knows how many episodes in the future?
Yeah.
The what's it called? The thing she Holdo's
lights. Yeah, the light speed. I know
that thing kind of does ruin it for me because I'm like, why didn't anybody ever else think of doing that? So that's the one. Fair. That's the one exception because
you can have an exception. That's totally fair.
Because that kind of just shatters the physics, I guess. I don't know. That's the one thing. And
that also has like larger implications in general. That
I think they tried to explain it, the Holdo maneuver, they referred to it in Rise of Skywalker. I think they kind of explained why that won't work anymore. I forgot the reason, but I was like, I know you can't it's already out of the bag. You can't undo it now, so you got to explain it somehow.
Here's another fan service thing I'm curious. Actually, no, I gotta stick on this for a second. The Osha's turn to the dark side. I think it's cool. Again, I liked how it was set up in episode 6. I liked the relationship between her and Kamir. I mean, if Kamir told me to turn to the dark side, I simply would. I mean, it wouldn't even really be a question. It'd be easy. But I think that it's exactly. I think you can see it from a mile away, but I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think that the people working on costume design, production design knew that, because the way we're dressing Osha, Star Wars has always operated with a lot of visual storytelling motifs that very clearly delineate good from bad, right? And so you got May dressed in all white, and you got Osha dressed in all black. I wonder what's going to happen in this episode. But again, that's not a criticism. That's just good, clear visual storytelling.
What's that thing called? The color theory, or no? Is that what it's called?
Yes, I think so. I have not taken film 101 in a while, but I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay, or like the colors mean something. They're not always just because.
Yeah, and so like I think that stuff is good, and I generally like Amandla. How do you say her last name? Sternberg, I think. Yeah. I think that she's good in the show. I think that she's given impossible material, because the 2 is one thing, in my opinion, is just a hard sell. But when you get her in a good moment like this, I think it's cool. And I saw people saying Stenberg. I saw people on Twitter saying like, "Oh, her force choke was so lame. I didn't believe it." Like when Hayden Christensen did it in 2005. I'm like, my brother in Christ, you've been saying for 2 decades that Hayden Christensen's a terrible actor. What are you talking about? Now, I've never believed that. I've always said that there was a certain charm to his performance of Anakin, and I stand by that. And I also stand by the fact that I think that Amandla does I think she does, like Hayden Christensen, about as good as you can expect somebody who's not a super high tier actor to do with material that's just not very good. And I know that that's a ton of asterisks, but I think that she sells that scene to me. I like her, and I like her turn to the dark side, even if it's obvious.
I love the revisionism we've got now with where people are just like, actually Hayden's not so bad. Like I like good for him, man. I like how he's kind of come back around in the positive light now. But I saw that complaint too, and a lot of it just feels very like you're taking one still frame out of like an entire sequence. Because I think there is another sequence later on, like when Soul's kind of like the crackling, he's kind of like, it's okay, or what, or like kind of like consoling her, like while he's choking and barely able to breathe. Like we kind of see like the expression on her face is much more like angry, and I'm like, okay, like you took like the worst possible scene as your kind of your straw man argument, and it's like it doesn't really stand up to scrutiny, I think. But that whole sequence, the sad end of Soul. Again, I always say like I don't think these guys are gonna make it out of the show alive. Yeah. And none of the Jedi, I felt, of the main like group that goes to look for Kilnaka, like none of them are surviving, and I knew like Soul, like, he has to die by the end, and like they have to keep the lore, the canon in check. They can't be a Sith out in the open unless everybody who knows about it die. And that's the thing that's addressed. A lot of people were saying like, oh, like the Sith. Kiadi Moody says that the Sith haven't seen 1,000 years, like they're gonna break lore, and it's like, no, that's like to the best of their knowledge. Yeah, and he killed all the witnesses, so the canon, the lore is still intact to me, it seems like. And then I don't know if you wanted to say any more, Aaron, but then we get 2 interesting cameos. One for the first time, canonizing a long beloved character, and then another one which I also predicted we would get because of how long his lifespan is. But Aaron, was there anything else you wanted to say before?
I don't think so. I mean, there's stuff I want to say about the mind wiping of May and the cover up of the Jedi, but I actually want to save that because some of our friends' comments get into some of these things at a high level, and we can talk about it then. But let's talk about the 2 cameos. I think they're both really funny for different reasons.
Okay.
The Darth Plagueis cameo. Here's how I described it to Tucker, who has not watched the show. It's like if you took the end credit scene from a Marvel movie and you inserted it like an hour and 15 minutes into the runtime and you never addressed it. You just cut to it happens, and you keep moving. Now, I do like the idea that Darth Plagueis is like hiding on this rock. I think that the idea that he's just here in the cave unbeknownst to other people, is interesting. But also, like what am I
Why?
really supposed to take away from this? Other than it's cool to see him, and I guess it is cool to see him.
I think for if you're really into the lore, it gives you a time frame of who or what is operating at this given time.
Sure. That's a
And
good
so
point.
by just putting that in, just by putting him in, we know, okay, we know exactly in terms of like the line of the rule of two, like, okay, where we're going to be. Like if Plagueis is, established as a Sith, and that means that obviously the next person's going to be Sidious, but now we have the whole thing now with, clearly now we have to know about what's going to be Kamir and Osha's fate at some point if we're going to
Yeah.
maintain the continuity going forward. So it's kind of just a wink and a nudge and kind of like okay, like we know more or less now what the lineage looks like, kind of thing.
Yeah,
That's pretty
and
much
I
it.
mean, I am, and we'll talk about this more in a little bit, but I think a season 2 of The Acolyte is maybe more compelling than what season 1 ended up being, just because less characters on the board, less weird plot line, clearer objectives for the characters. The idea of Plagueis being in the background and Kamir training up Osha, I like that, and I think that could go somewhere. I just think it's funny that he's just like peeking out of a cave for a second, and then we leave him. But
It is a funny shot, yeah.
the other one, of course, is Yoda. I think that it's just like, it's kind of like, okay, Yoda's just been like pondering for the entire show. Okay, I mean, I just don't really know what to make of it. I'm like, yeah, there's Yoda. He's
been
still alive.
meditating. He's been meditating for 8 episodes.
True.
Yeah, it doesn't really say much, right? But like you said, I think you said it perfectly. It's a Marvel cameo. It's a Marvel end credit cameo. That's literally what the whole Yoda scene is. It's just kind of like we knew he was alive. He was operating this time. I mean, I kind of said like, oh, I imagine we're going to see Yoda at some point, and we do. But I really thought maybe I thought he was going to show up in at least 2 or 3 episodes. Give like, I don't know, a paragraph's line. Maybe he was going to be the one doing like the teaching the younglings in the scene or something. But he's kind of just here, and now I wonder if the greater implication is that Yoda's in on the cover up too. Then, if that's what's gonna happen, and maybe like it's kind of reminds me of the whole thing about I don't know if they're going to run with this with the narrative, but the failure of the Jedi to predict or sense the Sith, and like, well, yeah, you got the guy who's been around for just as long as the Sith have been gone, kind of overseeing stuff. And he's kind of just like, he's just there, right? And you don't have enough fresh new blood, maybe to a firebrand political Jedi to
Right.
Play ball with the Senate or something. So you kind of have, I don't know if it's like a metaphor for just, you have an entrenched, what's the term I'm looking for? Like a older political body, not to get, too political about the current world, but these old timers who are kind of just sticking around and not really doing anything and not being proactive. And,
that's these what elderly statesman types.
Yeah, maybe that's what Yoda kind of is. And that's why maybe this Jedi start to, rot after a while. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't even like, I wouldn't if there's a season 2 of The Acolyte, which I do feel is a coin flip. We do know that the audience for the show pretty precipitously has just fallen, which is a disappointment, but not, I think, surprising. Sadly, but if they do,
how much what the viewership is like.
Let me see if I can find it really quick. There's a headline, obviously, because TV like viewership reporting is so backwards. We get it like a month late.
Mm-hmm.
Nielsen Acolyte. Let's see here. Let's look at the news tab here. The Acolyte disappears from Nielsen charts here.
Oh.
Now the least watched Star Wars series in Disney Plus, and even lower than Andor. It's learned. This comes from Cosmic Book News. This is Matt McGloin reporting on the Nielsen charts. It's learned that with its 4th episode, The Acolyte is no longer appearing on the Nielsen ratings viewership charts. The data suggests that The Acolyte is now the least watched Star Wars show on Disney Plus and has lower viewership than even Andor. The Acolyte went from 488 million minutes watched with its 2-episode premiere to 370 with episode 3, and now it's totally gone.
So not even the hate watching was enough.
So yeah, obviously those are not very good numbers, and probably makes it somewhat likely that we're not going to get that next season. But I would like to see them try again. I think that there's enough of a foundation here that we could get something special with a little bit more elbow grease. I don't really know the best way to phrase that, but let's actually transition to our larger conversation here, Andrew. Just looking at the Acolyte season one as a whole, looking at what we've gotten and sort of where things go from here, I guess. So on the whole, would you say now we've seen the whole thing?
Mm-hmm. It's behind us.
What it's behind us. What do you make of the Acolyte? We both, for what it's worth, have this as our second lowest ranked live action Disney Plus show. We both have Book of Boba Fett at the bottom. Shocker. Acolyte up a step from there. But would you classify the show for you on the whole as a disappointment?
I yeah. I mean, yeah. I would. We talked about before about how there's ranking Star Wars, as a in general against other productions and other stuff, and there's ranking Star Wars within the realm of Star Wars. And I think this, like you said, we've on the Discord channel we have the visual of numbers all the live action series, and Acolyte's second to last, and it's not. When there's no action going on, it's not that fun of a watch. Like, I think Yord and Jackie, for as long as they were around, there wasn't really much going on with them. Soul as this conflicted. As the show went on, I felt less sympathy for Soul. I felt like as we learn more about him, he kind of just comes off as very possessive and just very flawed. He just became much more flawed as the show went on, which I thought was kind of interesting. Just how with not just with the cover up, he's kind of thrown under the bridge with the whole cover up thing of how he's kind of seen as like this rogue like outline, like, oh yeah, like well a few years ago, this Jedi Master, he was involved in an incident that involved the death of a bunch of Force witches, and so he ended his life or whatever. Like, that's not how it happened, but like, I mean, it doesn't really. I don't have much sympathy for Soul to be like oh, like they did him dirty. I'm like, oh yeah, that's messed up, but okay, moving on. You know what I mean? Like, just the writing, the dialogue. It's not fair to compare it to Andor, which is like the peak of monologue delivering and just great lines. Never more than 12, and keep climbing, and obviously it's not fair to compare it to that. Even though I just did, but it's just, I don't know, like Acolyte. I feel like in a few years or pretty soon in the future, we're gonna get like the best YouTube created like cut of this show, and it's gonna be like more than half of it's gonna be combat scenes, and then people are gonna someone out there is gonna make a really good cut of the Acolyte. I think the bones are there for something good. I think the story of Kill Bill meets Frozen, which was the pitch. I think we can clearly see now that it's over. Like, they definitely got the Kill Bill part right. The Frozen part, other than just the twins thing, and that's it. Just a very bare bones outline. Like, didn't really work out. Again, the whole child acting was just not great, and I remember when we did the first section of this review or this kind of overview, I was worried that the show would be not great and turn off Lucasfilm from straying from the Skywalker stuff. And now I'm really worried that Lucasfilm might be permanently turned off from doing Skywalker related Star Wars. And it's what I feared the show would be is what the show what I feared it would turn out to be is what it ended up being. But yeah, I'm kind of disappointed, and I think if there was like a genie granting wishes, and if I had as many wishes I could, I wouldn't wish the show to not exist. What I would wish is to just change it, tweak a few things. I think maybe make Yord and Jeki into one character rather than two different characters might help. Just combine their mannerisms into one person, because Yord's whole thing was that he was like a perfectionist, and I think that would work. And Jeki didn't really have a thing, right? She didn't have like any outstanding traits other than just her physical design. So like maybe put those together. The whole thing with the force switches, maybe either, I don't know if you would scrap that, because the whole thing with the virgins is never explained. By the end of the show, we still don't know what it is, what it does, how it does what it does. What, we know that the Jedi are there because something pulled them there, told them that it was there, and that's kind of it. I think I might have maybe either reworked the witch line or kind of tied it closer maybe to Khmer and the Sith, maybe kind of just so there's more at stake or more of a vested interest for Khmer to have interest in the twins with the whole Force Virgins thing. I would tweak. There's good stuff here,
Yeah.
but it's kind of buried underneath all this muck of unnecessary, just unnecessary retreading, going from planet to planet, going back to the planet, going, like there's stuff here, but a lot of it is filler in a show that really does not have room for filler. So I am disappointed. And I always say even bad Star Wars is still Star Wars, and I mean that's for the action. I say that's still true.
I pretty much echo everything you're saying. I mean, for me, it's a big disappointment. I think ultimately, I agree with you on the whole that I love the Star Wars universe so much, and the characters, the worlds, the themes, everything about it, that I can overlook a lot of technically insufficient filmmaking. And I think that shows that I really like a lot, like Kenobi, like Ahsoka, suffer really heavily from some pretty inconsistent filmmaking. But I never really cared because I loved what was underneath that.
Right.
I think the problem with the Acolyte is not that I don't love what's below that, like, technical filmmaking. It's that what's under there is just really buried by it. It's really encumbered by all these issues that we've been talking about. The Book of Boba Fett is just boring, and it's paced weird, and there's weird stuff. But ultimately, the sin of the Book of Boba Fett is that it's boring, in my opinion. I think the problem with the Acolyte is that it has some of the best ideas that they've had for Star Wars in a while, but we really have to dig for them. You make a great point. You make a great twofold point about the Virgins and about Khmer. We try to establish this mystery at the very end that, that Khmer was a Padawan of some importance, and he turned to the dark side. And it's fairly obvious that is his backstory to some extent, but we're trying to set up that with Vernestra.
Right.
We're trying to close the loop on this stuff on Brendok, but I don't really think we do, and I think it becomes at best unclear why Khmer has a vested interest in all of this stuff. I think it's at best unclear, as you were saying, what the Virgins even was supposed to function as in the narrative. And so I think that it's hard as a viewer to get past that. I think it's easier to get past poorly lit or blocked or framed or oddly written scenes in Ahsoka, because what's there, the propulsive force, is the narrative, at least. And I love those characters. I love that world. I love some of the characters of the Acolyte. I love a lot of the ideas of the Acolyte. But these are all new players, right? And if you don't set them up right, I can't really get behind them. And so as the show keeps going and gets more convoluted and the plot becomes harder and harder to grab hold of, I think that the show just suffers in a way that the others don't. I think that Dave Filoni has the benefit, as Tanner said, and we'll read this out in a second, of just loving Star Wars and setting up things you already know in a context that makes you feel good as a fan, right? To the most part.
Yeah.
The Acolyte is aiming higher than that, which is why I was so excited. As much as I love Dave Filoni's stuff, and there's a place for it, I think that there needs to be more of a place for your Andors, your Acolytes. But that higher ambition requires a higher level of execution that I just simply don't think that this show had, unfortunately. But to get into it a little bit more specifically, I want to pull up here some comments that we can respond to from our friends in the Discord, who do a nice job of guiding us to the end of this conversation, I think.
Really well written, yeah.
Very, very good stuff. Yeah. So let's start out here with the first person who submitted, which was Seth, as he goes on Discord, the hymbologist at law, who shares the following with us here. I think it's not the best, but for none of the reasons the internet pundits would have you believe. I think it isn't what anyone really wanted. It didn't have enough action or plain old lightsaber duels, but what was there was amazing. The mystery never grabbed me. None of the characters besides Kamir and Sol really stuck with me, which is a big problem with such an ensemble cast, which I think speaks to your point about making Jackie and Yord a single character. The pacing led me more often than not to be bored, perhaps napping a bit, and episode 7's placement is one of the worst instances of this. It's an integral episode for the show, but it just does not work if you put it anywhere else. It doesn't even work where it is. All that being said, the finale was strong enough that I'd be interested in season 2 to see how wide the corruption spreads and how far the cover-up will go. And that last point, I think, is an important one, because, we haven't really touched on the cover-up too much yet, Andrew, which is obviously this larger narrative here about Venestra lying to the Senate, Inquisition's board about the whole event, pinning everything on Sol, despite her knowing that Kamir is at work, and sort of just trying to, as Sol, as Andara, as Torben, and as Kanaka did, just try to close the book on the whole incident. Whether that's going to be effective or not, we don't know unless there's a season 2. I think the only way to read season 1 is that, well, it was effective because we never hear about it in any Star Wars media ever again. Now, obviously, it's new, but right, I think if you end the story here, the narrative is the Jedi are duplicitous. They are sort of ashamed of sort of the excesses. They're having a hard time maintaining their order. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to be taken from the cover-up and from the fact that the cover-up seemingly is effective, but obviously we don't know for sure where that narrative goes, but I think it's a good jumping off point for season 2 if they do one.
Yeah, I mean, knowing Lucasfilm as I know them, if this doesn't get picked up for season 2, you can imagine a lot of these things are going to be addressed like in a book or in a comic or something, just because they usually don't like having a lot of that's what they did when when the Clone Wars kind of ended and the Darth Maul was still alive and unresolved. They did a whole comic line of Darth Maul. He shows up again in freaking Solo, the Star Wars story, and they really didn't know. I think they knew what they wanted to do, but they didn't know how to do it until they went back and here's another the final true season of Clone Wars, and then we finally got the resolution with Darth Maul there. So if they don't have a clear cut avenue of doing what they want to do on the big screen, or in this case a Disney Plus live series or whatever, they're gonna find another way to kind of beat around the bush with it with some tie-in of some kind.
Yeah, I agree. Let's go to another comment here from my friend Steven, who's going to take us, I think, even deeper into this point we're talking about here. Greetings. Well, hello there, Steven. Overall, I'm just deeply conflicted about The Acolyte. For a show that attracted so much hate for gross reasons just by existing, I really wanted to be a supporter. For parts of it, I am. I like the broader presentation of the Jedi and the B-plot of their status in the Senate. It actually gets into church and state as a wider metaphor, which is interesting. I like presenting the Jedi as a political entity and faith-based entity, and as a kind of police analog or special service where we see protectionism and corruption in line with this. The existence of the villain lines up nicely with this, and he was just brilliant. The issue is, none of that is actually the main story. The twin story was just deeply uninvolving and took up most of the runtime. Jedi politics felt like an addition at the end when it should have been a sustained plotline. The dynamic between the Senator and the Jedi Master was fascinating, and was a couple of scenes in the finale. The twin stuff didn't tie into the themes that were interesting and overshadowed them. The 2 backstory episodes focusing on them were the worst 2 by far, the first one just feeling necessary. It never justified itself as a plot nor the characters within. Sol was awesome but was constrained by this plot. Now, I'm not Mr. Lore. I don't care when Ki-Adi-Mundi was fictionally born, but some of the wider choices around the world building were just bad. I know crystal bleeding was in the Respawn game, but it's silly, and it makes it weird that Vader didn't do it in one of his pre-Vader genocides. Stephen, we already litigated this. I've gone on for too long, though. Basically, the really good stuff was secondary material that wasn't well facilitated by the A plot, and the A plot wasn't very interesting. That episode, and you know the one, owned, though. Sorry about the essay. It's Stephen, you never have to apologize about the essay. I really appreciate it. It's very well done. But yeah, there's the main thing I want to hammer in here from Stephen's point is this notion of the twins narrative overshadowing everything else. And I think that is true. And I think that speaks to the criticism I was leveling more generally earlier in my overarching thoughts on whether the show disappointed me or not. I just think that, you know, as we find ourselves under the big yellow tree at this sort of like site zero for the virgins or whatever the hell, you know, I don't find myself feeling the emotion of the relationship between Osha and May, and I don't necessarily think it's purely an acting issue. I think it's a scripting one. Mm-hmm. I think that it's unconvincingly set up and it's unconvincingly explained, and I think in the absence of a concrete explanation and a really compelling, you know, writing of the relationship, it's just hard to grapple with the fact that is the thrust of the show. That it is not the Jedi material, which I think is a lot richer. It is this interpersonal relationship that I think is built upon ill-conceived concepts, really. So I would agree with Stephen that I think that's really where the Acolyte falters the most.
Yeah, at the end with the whole, like, when Osha's like, I'll go with you if you let my sister go, and it's like, I'm like, does she want to go? Does May even care about anything? Like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, yeah, she kind of gave up on her mission when she got fed up, and, you know, when she didn't know who Kamir was, she kind of fed up. She's like, you know what? I'm just gonna turn myself into the Jedi. I don't care anymore. Like I felt like and then she goes back to like trying to kill Soul, and I'm like, hold on though. Like, what's connecting this? What are the motives? Like, why do we decide, I guess we are gonna continue with the mission? Oh wait, no, we're not. Like, it's like it is very confusing. And like, I mean I've never acted in anything, but I have to imagine there's only so much an actor can do with what they're given in terms of motivations. And like, I would love to be a fly on the wall of like people, the writing room in general, and it's like does all this make sense? And everyone's just like, it's good enough. It's good enough. Like, because, and then when they're at the tree and like, okay, well, like, hey, if I'm able to find you, the Jedi are able to find you, and like, and it ends up not mattering anyways because the Jedi still find her, and it's like, and then okay, we're just gonna wipe your memories, and we're just gonna do a Men in Black, you know, style kind of thing, set you back, and it's just like, all right, you're done. Like, just, you know, stop, like, reboot, you know, restore settings, and, you know, set her off on her way, and like. And like, I think we're supposed to meant to feel something or feel bad for like, I didn't feel anything. Like, I was like, I don't know if we're supposed to care that May's gonna get system rebooted and just sent out, and I was like, okay, I guess we have to do something to get, you know, again, make so they're not together and get them apart, and it's just. Yeah, I agree with Steven. I also really love how the idea of how he said like he wished there was more of the politics stuff, and I imagine that's probably going to be, if there is a season 2, then that's going to be the. It just reeks of a lot of set building, kind of just. This feels like Age of Ultron, almost Age of Ultron levels of sacrificing good storytelling for setting things up in the future that might have a payoff, but first you need to make sure that this thing is good enough so it gets to that point, you know what I mean, kind of. So yeah, I agree with him. He worded that really well.
Let's read our last response here, and this comes from Tanner, who says, having only seen 50% of the live action Star Wars shows, I suppose you can take my thoughts with a grain of salt. The show operates such this is interesting. The show operates at such an evenly uninteresting keel that it becomes hard to even make fun of it. For as much as I dislike the Book of Boba Fett, that's a show that comes clearly from the Dave Filoni headspace of, quote, I want to put all my favorite action figures in the same sandbox. The reason why they're there is not important. Sort of what I was talking about before. In the lead up to the Acolyte, it was promised to be a show with a more serious tone, i.e. the next Andor. But as a wise man once said, and he's talking about me here, Andor is good because it has themes that transcend Star Wars. So the Acolyte isn't smart enough in storytelling or theme to be engaging, and isn't dumb enough for the Filoni bros to be on board with. This is Tanner's words, not mine. All the best parts can be experienced in 45-second viral Twitter clips. I'll quickly parrot some other thoughts. The writers basically stumble over themselves to make every mystery element glaringly obvious. What could have been good performances are dulled by overstretched storytelling, and the whole project feels like the most Disney Plus show that would have been improved as a film, i.e. bigger budget and shorter runtime. Not good, but not bad enough to warrant course correction. Oh, and my girlfriend watched episode 6 with me and really liked Basil, so it has that going for it. I think what I appreciate about Basil more, reflecting on him, is that he is cute, but he's also sort of like weaselly in a kind of like gross way. Are you familiar with the word scrungly, Andrew?
Is that a word?
Scrung, it's like an internet word. It describes like if you took a cat and like dunked it in water and it was like all skittish and bug-eyed and like skinny because its hair is all fucked up. Like that would be scrungly. It's like cute in like an ugly way. Like Salacious Crumb is another great example.
Oh, okay. I think I've heard you say this word before. Okay, yeah.
And I think Basil is almost in that camp. But that's besides the point. I the last thing I want to drill in on, because I think we touched on a lot of what Tanner has said. But the idea of it as the next Andor, and again, this is where a lot of my criticism comes from, and he talks about it referring to what I was saying before, this idea that Andor transcended Star Wars in its theming, whereas I don't think the Acolyte necessarily does. Now, I like the point Stephen raises, and it's a point well taken, that you can read the Acolyte as some sort of larger church and state metaphor. I think the problem with that, and the problem with how Leslie Headland was talking about the show versus how it ended up being, is this idea of interrogating power, authority, policing, religion. As Stephen said, it's all secondary to a much more sort of lore-concerned plot line about Osha and May. And that's not really what Andor is. Andor is, to a fault, not really about Star Wars. and I think that that's interesting. But to me, we land in this middle ground with the show, as Tanner says. Although I wouldn't say that the Filoni stuff is dumb. I would just say it's different. But to each their own on that point. Because Dave Filoni, tip my cowboy hat to Dave Filoni. He did a lot of good stuff. Tip my cowboy hat if I was wearing one. I think it just leaves me unfulfilled as a viewer wanting something more. And I think the expectation was well set from a marketing perspective, but in reality, the substance for me is just not there with the Acolyte. I end up being interested in it really for the action, which is amazing. It's amazing choreography. I'm interested for the small lore details that we're talking about with the bleeding sabers and with everything. That's really good stuff. And I'm interested in these ideas of church and state if you want to try to pull them out, but it's hard to do so when those really just appear in the last 3 episodes. Because the senator doing the sort of investigation Jedi Order, that's an awesome idea. That's a really, really awesome idea. And, as we get into episode 3, we see how Jedi versus Senate plays out. But seeing that here, I liked a lot. But it's too backgrounded. So I find that the Acolyte wants to say more than it's capable of. And if we're sort of giving hypothetical notes for season 2, if it were to happen, I'd want to see them sort of pick a lane a little bit better,
Yeah.
Either focus more heavily on sort of interrogating in-universe Star Wars things, or think a little bit more about how you can treat this as an allegory, as Andor did. So that's kind of where I sit on the Acolyte. I think it's sadly a low-tier show. I was hoping, in an ideal world, it would have been my number 2 behind Andor. Well, I mean, in an ideal world, every new Star Wars thing is better than the last one. But the realistic hope for me is that I could slot this in right under Andor, and I just don't think that I can. But I do really hope that they get to try again. I think you got to let them try again. I think there's too much good stuff here. The High Republic, again, it's never going to get off the ground if you don't really put a little bit of elbow grease behind it. So try the Acolyte again. Give it another shot.
Yeah. I'm just thinking back to how many years was it ago? When the whole thing of Disney Plus was being talked about, like on, what was it, 2020? I forgot when it was exactly. But when they were having the whole slate, the announcement of all these shows of Obi-Wan and then the Lando show, which we never got, and all these other projects, and they mentioned the Acolyte. And I remember in that sea of shows of things we already knew about, characters we already knew, like the Acolyte, like that stood out to me, right? I mean, we're gonna get to Skeleton Crew eventually whenever that comes out. That's like the next thing, but like I was like, what is that about? And I remember like the imagery, sort of like a scarred slash across it, and they were kind of vague about what it was going to be. It's just like, oh, it's set a couple hundred years before the Phantom Menace. Like, oh, okay, that's gonna be cool. And it's about like something about the stuff preceding the fall of the Jedi before like the prequels. I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds really cool. Like that was my most anticipated title. Abram was of all the stuff. Acolyte was the one I'm like, okay, we got Kenobi, we got Ahsoka, like, all right, we're getting closer to the Acolyte, and then like just for this to be the payoff, and I'm just kind of like, maybe Star Wars does need to lean on, like you said, the familiar stuff. Maybe that's what it really does need. But I'm like, man, that's also kind of boring too, though. But
it is, and I don't think you need to. Like this, I think that's the problem. And I think was it Tanner? I think Tanner made the point. If not, I'll just take it for myself. This idea that, you don't want Disney and Lucasfilm to take the wrong lesson from the Acolyte. The problem with the Acolyte isn't that it's new. That's the best part of the Acolyte. The best part of the Acolyte is it has new ideas in terms of filmmaking, what the wuxia sequence is, and has new ideas in terms of plot content. It's probably the most interesting the Jedi is like an idea has been in a while.
Yeah.
And Kamir is immediately beloved by fans. I mean, there's no doubt that for as toxic as everything on the Acolyte is, that he's just, everybody loves him. So the takeaway is not that you should shy away from the Skywalker saga or shy away from the points of the timeline we know about. I just think it's, you really need to have more people looking some of this stuff over, because you look at or I'll put it this way, I look at Rise of Skywalker and I say, you had J.J. Abrams come in, try to safe script, and you had 50 people in the boardroom go over every little bit of it with red pen to make sure that it was the most mass market Star Wars thing ever. To me, this same with The Force Awakens. Doesn't make it bad. I love The Force Awakens. I don't love Rise of Skywalker, but that's a different conversation. The point is, you can see the oversight in those projects. I don't think you see that oversight in The Acolyte, which, in the hands of the right talent, is great. It gives you Andor, or even it gives you what Dave Filoni does, to an extent. His stuff is also very, I think, by committee in some respects. And I don't want this to just be it's a Leslie Headland problem. Because at a certain point, if you throw her into the deep end to make The Acolyte, and you put all the press responsibilities on her, all the burdens on her, she's the face of the show, she's the one who's going to take the fall. I don't think that's fair. But I think that there's a middle ground between leaving that team to go off to its own devices and make whatever The Acolyte is, and sort of focus testing your way into The Force Awakens. There's a middle ground to be found. So I really hope that they take what worked from this, and whether it's Acolyte Season 2 or it's just people from this project on something else in the Star Wars universe, I hope that they just really don't get gun shy about trying new things, because the High Republic on the whole hasn't really worked out for them. I just don't think they've gone about it the right way. It's an execution issue. And in some ways, it's kind of good that it's an execution issue, because you can fix execution. It's harder to fix the underlying ideas. So...
yeah, I mean, we're gonna get I don't know what time period it is in, but Skeleton Crew is like the next big live action Star Wars show, and it seems very different. It's Goonies meets Lost in Space. That's not something we've really seen in Star Wars yet so far. So
yeah,
they're kind of, whether they like it or not, they're already kind of deep into the new ideas kind of front. So hopefully that pays off. Hopefully that one does pay off.
Yeah.
So
there's also a lot of interesting people working on that show. The Daniels, who most recently made Everything Everywhere All at Once, are doing an episode.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Bryce Dallas Howard is back, which is great.
Okay.
The guy, he's got a one-word name. I forget his name, unfortunately, who did episodes 7 and 8 of this show, of Acolyte, is doing an episode.
I know what you're talking about. It's a one-word name, but it's like a long one, right? I think.
Yeah, it's like Kagawa or something.
Yeah, I remember watching the credits. I'm like, oh, we got like a share kind of situation, like the last name needed.
I forget his name, but it's a really good mix of people. Did you see Andrew Incidental, just as we're wrapping up here? Did you see? And I don't know if it's real, but it looks really real. Did you see that? Like at Hobby Lobby, a piece of like a wall scroll for the Skeleton Crew was up for sale, and somebody took a picture of it and posted it to Twitter, and it's like new promo art of the show and the characters.
Is it
Did you
like
see
the one
this?
with the skulls or whatever on the side?
No, it's
Or
like
not?
a
Oh.
hand drawn. It's not quite hand. It looks almost like a poster for the prequels films. You know when they do the hand drawn ones.
Yeah, with like the very soft color lighting and all
Yeah.
no, but now I'm looking it up because I'm curious to see.
Because
what
I
you're
saw it on
talking
Twitter,
about.
like it was just like it was on the shelf at Hobby Lobby, which is very weird.
No, I'm looking about. Oh no, I don't see anything.
It could be fake. I'll see if I can find it after this and send it to you. But yeah, Skeleton Crew could be interesting. And obviously, we have James Mangold's History of the Force movie coming eventually, maybe too. So perchance the Acolyte, in that we'll have some kind of relationship. But who knows?
Yeah, I can't find it. But
What we do know, Andrew, for a fact, is that I think we've talked about the Acolyte pretty much exhaustively, and I think given, which I'm very proud of, a super fair appraisal to this show, because for as much criticism it deserves, it's getting a lot that it doesn't. So I'm glad we were able to really sit down, talk our way through each episode, what works, what doesn't work, and come to, I think, what should be the conclusion. Give them another chance. But you know what they're going to need with them, Andrew, to get that other chance?
yeah.
That's a hard segue. I really screwed it up for you.
Yeah, I was like,
You can't really do it.
Well, you know what? You know who has a great line is the senator we mentioned earlier in the shot.
Oh,
When he even
yes.
tells them, he's like, "Good luck," and he's like, "What is it again?" He say, "Oh yeah, I believe it's, may the force be with you."